Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Hey there, I'm Maria. My coworker Amy tells me for the 100th time today, "You're glowing." It's not because of the typical engagement excitement that people expect. No, my smile is for something else. Alex left a sticky note in my lunchbox with a hilariously bad stick figure drawing of us. He labeled his figure "still can't draw," and mine is "still says yes." That's what I love about us. We never follow the expected path. Take our first date, for example. Instead of the usual dinner and a movie, we ended up helping his elderly neighbor chase down her runaway pet rabbit in the rain. By the time we caught Mr. Whiskers, who, ironically, was not a cat, we were drenched, muddy, and laughing so hard we could barely breathe. The past 3 years with Alex have been full of these wonderfully quirky moments. Like the time we tried making homemade pasta and ended up with flour in places I'm still finding, or when he tried to teach me basketball, and I accidentally hit him in the face with the ball, twice. He now wears protective goggles whenever we play, looking like a dorky mad scientist. Our engagement story isn't TikTok famous. There were no flash mobs, elaborate scavenger hunts, or skywriting. Instead, Alex proposed while we were building a blanket fort during a power outage. We've been telling ghost stories by candlelight when, right in the middle of my overly dramatic ghost impression, he pulled out the ring and said, "I want all my power outages to be with you." People keep asking me about wedding plans and color schemes, but I'm too busy enjoying moments like Alex geeking out about space facts while we grocery shop or do laundry. "Did you know astronauts can't cry in space because tears don't fall?" he'll say, his eyes lighting up like a child sharing a secret. Sometimes, I catch him watching me when he thinks I'm not paying attention, and it makes me smile even more. Like when I'm trying to solve the Sunday crossword puzzle or dancing to 80s music while loading the dishwasher. Alex has this look that makes me feel like the most captivating person in the world, even if I've just spent 10 minutes ranting about how someone ate my clearly labeled yogurt from the office fridge. The ring feels different from what I expected, not in its appearance, which is beautiful, a vintage piece that belonged to his grandmother, but in what it symbolizes. It's not just about the future we're planning. It's about celebrating what we already share. This comfortable, quirky love feels like coming home after a long day and finding your favorite meal waiting, even though you never mentioned you were craving it. Last night, we sat on our tiny balcony, sharing leftover Chinese food straight from the containers. Alex was wearing his "This Is My Fancy Shirt" t-shirt, and we mapped out our future, guided by fortune cookie predictions. According to those cookies, we'll have 3 daughters, live in a house with a purple door, and become surprisingly good at origami. Watching him then, laughing so hard at his own bad jokes that he nearly choked on lo mein, I felt an undeniable certainty. Not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind. The kind that comes from knowing someone's flaws and strange habits and still thinking they're absolutely perfect for you. Now let's check the story from Alex's side. It's been 2 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days, not that I'm counting, since I last saw that name appear on her phone. I still remember sitting in our favorite coffee shop, my hands curled around a cooling cup of coffee, as she looked me in the eye and promised, really promised, that she understood why her friendship with James made me uncomfortable. There was something different about that conversation. Maybe it was the way she reached across the table, took my phone, and showed me as she removed him from her social media. "I choose us," she said. The ring had been burning a hole in my sock drawer for months before that day. I picked it out last summer, but every time I thought about proposing, something would happen. A casual mention of meeting James for coffee, a text notification I'd catch a glimpse of, or those group hangouts where he'd always somehow be present. Each time, the ring stayed hidden, and my doubts grew louder. It's funny how much lighter everything feels now. Last weekend, we were at her cousin's wedding, and for the first time, I wasn't spending the evening wondering if she was secretly messaging him during the quiet moments. Instead, I watched her dance, terribly, with reckless abandon. Because when Beyoncé comes on, she doesn't care who's watching. And all I could think was, this is it. This is our time. The proposal didn't go exactly as I had planned. I had everything arranged, dinner reservations at that fancy restaurant overlooking the city, a violinist on standby, the works. But that morning, seeing her in her old college sweatshirt, struggling to make French toast and getting more batter on herself than in the pan, I couldn't wait. The ring was upstairs, and before I even realized what I was doing, I was running to get it. She said yes before I could even finish asking. We were so caught up calling our families that the French toast ended up burning, but not even the smell of charred breakfast could ruin that moment. We ended up at our local diner for breakfast, still in our pajamas, looking like a mess and grinning like fools. Looking back, I realize how close I came to letting my fears cloud what we have. Those long conversations about boundaries with exes, And the arguments that started with, "he's just a friend," and ended with slammed doors, they feel distant now. Not forgotten, but like obstacles we had to overcome to reach this place. Now, when her phone buzzes, she reads her messages out loud without me needing to ask. Usually about work drama or her mom's latest cooking disaster. There's an ease in how she shares her life with me now. No hidden corners or careful omissions. Just last week, she even turned down an invitation to a mutual friends party because she knew James would be there. She didn't make a big deal out of it, just said, "Not our scene, babe. Let's do movie night instead." Sometimes, I still catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Old habits are hard to break. But then Maria will do something like leave sticky notes with terrible puns in my lunchbox, or send me a random text about how she can't wait to argue with me over wallpaper patterns when we buy our own place, and I remember. This is what trust feels like. This is what we fought for. The ring looks perfect on her finger, catching the light just right. But what's even more perfect is the way she absent-mindedly twists it while reading, just as she used to fidget with her hair. It's become part of her, just like she's become part of me. For the first time in our relationship, I'm not scanning for shadows in the corners. I'm looking forward. Now let's check Maria's side of the story. I've been staring at my phone for 20 minutes, debating whether to respond to James's text congratulating me on the engagement. It shouldn't be this complicated. He's just James, the same James who helped me move into my first apartment, taught me to drive stick shift in his beat-up Volkswagen, and supported me through my dad's passing 3 years ago. We dated for only 2 months in college before realizing we were better as friends. That was 7 years ago, and since then, he's become more like a brother than an ex. We were part of the same pre-med study group, both realizing we hated organic chemistry and switching majors together. James to business and me to marketing. It's funny how some people just stick around through all of life's plot twists. Alex doesn't see it that way. To him, James is an ex-boyfriend, while I see the friend who brought me soup during finals week, helped me build my IKEA furniture, even if he did put my bookshelf together backwards, and introduced me to his girlfriend, Sarah, last year. How threatening can someone be when they're the reason you have an embarrassing nickname from a botched attempt at dyeing your hair purple that turned out green? Maybe I should have set clearer boundaries with Alex from the beginning. But how do you explain a friendship that's survived 3 apartments, 2 career changes, and countless bad dates? James was there through my disastrous relationship with Mike, my quarter-life crisis when I almost moved to Seattle, and that phase where I thought I could become a professional baker. He still teases me about my rock-hard cookies. I understand why Alex feels uneasy. If the roles were reversed, I'd probably feel the same. But cutting James out completely feels like erasing a whole chapter of my life. It's not just losing a friend. It's acting as if those shared memories and inside jokes don't matter. Like the time we got so lost hiking we ended up in the wrong state, or our rainy Sunday tradition of watching terrible sci-fi movies. The engagement ring glimmers as I type and erase yet another reply to his text. I promised Alex I'd keep my distance, and I have. No more casual coffee meetups. No more group game nights where James would always play the banker in Monopoly and cheat, as if it were an inside joke only we shared. I've kept my word, but ghosting someone who has been there for every significant chapter of my adult life feels like I'm erasing a part of myself. Just last week, Sarah posted photos of their long-awaited trip to Japan, the one James had been planning since college. He's finally doing it, ticking off the dreams we once shared during late-night study marathons. I wanted so badly to text him, to tease him about the ridiculous tourist shirt he wore in one photo, exactly the kind we used to joke we'd buy ironically. Instead, I just liked the post and closed Instagram, a quiet act of restraint. Alex has been so happy lately. Seeing him relaxed and confident in us means everything to me. Still, there's this persistent voice in my head asking, shouldn't love be secure enough to survive old friendships? James wasn't just part of my past relationships. He was part of my journey of figuring out who I am, beyond just who I'm with. He knows all my clumsy attempts at adulthood, my awkward stories, my worries about turning into my mother. I read the text again. Congrats, Nance. Alex is a lucky guy. Hope you're happy. Simple, friendly, exactly what you'd expect from an old friend. After another minute, I set my phone down without replying. Sometimes, maintaining peace means letting certain bridges fade into the background, even if those very connections shaped the path that brought you to where you are now. Now let's check the story from Alex's side. It's just a birthday party, Alex. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? I look at Maria across the kitchen island, her hands cradling a coffee mug, one she got from James back in college. Even now, traces of him linger in these subtle ways. The anger building inside me isn't a sudden flame but a cold, deep-seated certainty. Let me be very clear. I say, keeping my voice controlled. Every guy who claims to be just a friend is often waiting for his chance. I've seen it before, countless times. I've watched those so-called friends comfort someone after a breakup, only to make their move weeks later. Maria opens her mouth to object, but I raise my hand to stop her. Do you know why James didn't invite me to his party? Because in his mind, I'm just temporary, the current boyfriend, or rather, fiancé, standing in his way. He's stayed close for 7 years, Maria. 7 years of being your emotional safety net. The ring on her finger catches the light, and a bitter taste rises in my throat. When I proposed, it wasn't just about that moment, or even just about love. I proposed because you finally understood this boundary, and you promised me. You looked me in the eye and said you understood why your friendship with him crossed a line. She sets down her mug so forcefully that coffee splashes over the rim. That's not fair, she says, her voice tight. James has a girlfriend. He's always been supportive of our relationship. A hollow laugh escapes me, without a trace of humor. Of course he has. That's part of the playbook, Maria. Be the supportive friend, the confidant, the guy who just gets you. But think about it. Why does he need to text you at midnight with random thoughts? Why do your catch-ups have to be just the two of you? Why can't his girlfriend or I be there? Silence stretches between us, broken only by the faint sound of a car alarm outside, which quickly fades. I take a deep breath and continue, my voice softer now. I've seen this dynamic too many times. Genuine platonic friendships between men and women are already rare, but between exes, they're almost impossible. One person almost always holds onto feelings, waiting for an opportunity. More often than not, it's the guy, because we're wired that way. We leave the door open, even if it's just a crack. Maria's face flushes with anger. So what? You're saying men and women can't be friends? That's outdated and sexist. No, I reply, holding her gaze. I'm saying that from the beginning, I've been honest about this boundary. I'm saying that I proposed to you after you understood and respected that boundary. And now, you're not asking, but telling me that you're going to his birthday party. A party where there will be drinking, dancing, and reminiscing about old times. I walk to the window, needing some distance. You know what hurts the most? It's not even about James anymore. It's about respect. Respect for my feelings, respect for our relationship, respect for the promises you made when you accepted this ring. You agreed that some things would have to change. Turning back to her, I say, I'm not trying to control you, Maria. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I can and cannot accept in our marriage. I can't accept you maintaining an intimate friendship with someone who's seen you naked. The silence that follows is heavy, laden with everything we've built together and everything we stand to lose. When I speak again, my voice is quiet but resolute. So no, it's not just a birthday party. It's a choice. If you go, you're choosing to disregard everything I've said, everything you promised, and everything this ring represents. I start toward our bedroom but pause at the doorway. You know what the saddest part is? James knows exactly what he's doing. He's testing how much influence he still has over you. And right now, you're showing him that it's more than your fiancé does. Now let's check the story from Maria's side. As I settle onto the couch, it feels foreign beneath me, every cushion a reminder that this isn't where I'm meant to be sleeping. My engagement ring feels heavy on my finger as I scroll through the photos from James's party. Each image feels like evidence of my wrongdoing. Me laughing with old friends, blowing out candles on James's cake, group shots where everyone is raising their glasses. I thought coming home late would mean Alex would be asleep and that we could deal with this in the morning. Instead, he was sitting in the dark living room, waiting for me. Had fun? His voice was flat when I walked in. No anger, which somehow made it worse. He didn't even look at my attempted smile or respond when I leaned in to kiss him. Instead, he pointed to the couch and walked to our bedroom. Our bedroom. The door shut behind him, and it might as well have been a wall. Morning light creeps through the blinds, and I hear Alex in the kitchen. My heart leaps. Maybe he's cooled down. Maybe we can talk this out. I practiced my explanation again. It was just a party. Nothing happened. I barely even talked to James. But when I enter the kitchen, Alex's expression stops me cold. He extends his hand, the ring glinting in the light, but he doesn't look up from his coffee. 2 words, he says, and suddenly I can't breathe. Alex, please. It was stupid. I know, but Maria, his voice cracks slightly. I need you to understand something. This isn't about the party. This is about trust, about respect, about choices and consequences. You tried pushing the boundary again. You defied me and broke your promise. I start crying, The kind of ugly sobbing where I can't catch my breath. I'll cut him off completely. I'll block his number. I'll stop. Alex finally looks at me, and I wish he hadn't. His eyes are red-rimmed but dry. You've made those promises before, but last night proved something to me. You'll always choose the possibility of keeping him in your life over the certainty of keeping me in it. That's not true. I shout, but even as the words leave my mouth, I know they're a lie. Every boundary I agreed to, I found a way around. Every promise I made, I've bent. And for what? For someone who, as Alex points out, didn't even have the decency to invite my fiancée to his party. Alex stands, pushing his untouched coffee away. I called Rachel. She'll be here in an hour to help you pack. Pack? The word feels foreign. None of this makes sense. Just 24 hours ago, I was planning a wedding. You have until tomorrow evening to get your things. Anything left, I'll have shipped to your mom's. His voice is gentle, but the finality in it cuts deep. I've already called the wedding venue to cancel. I grab his arm as he passes. 3 years, Alex? Are you really throwing away 3 years? He carefully removes my hand. No, Maria. You threw it away. One decision at a time. One broken promise at a time. Last night was just the final one. The next few hours blur together. Rachel arrives, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my gaze as she helps pack my life into boxes. Alex stays in his home office, the door closed. I keep waiting for him to burst out, to yell, to give me one more chance to explain, but he doesn't. The silence is absolute. It's only when I'm in Rachel's car that my phone buzzes. It's James. Hope you're okay. Alex seems really out of line here. Want to grab coffee and talk about it? I stare at the message, and suddenly Alex's words from all those arguments echo in my head. About guys waiting in the wings. About the impossibility of true platonic friendship with an ex. I turn off my phone and lean my head against the window, watching our apartment building. His apartment building now disappear in the side mirror. The ring sits in a small box on what used to be our kitchen counter. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
The night began with a bang as my wife stumbled into the house with a group of her friends, clearly having had more than their fair share of drinks. They were loud, laughing uncontrollably, and the smell of alcohol filled the room. I was sitting on the couch, trying to unwind after a long day, when they burst in. One of them blurted out something about a wild idea they had come up with. Before I could even ask what they were talking about, my wife, slurring her words, said, "We're buying a horse." Isn't that amazing? I sat there, stunned, wondering if I'd misheard her. A horse? Apparently, this all started at a bar where they were celebrating some promotion one of them had received. The story got more absurd as they continued. One of my wife's friends had apparently hooked up with some guy from a ranch, and this somehow inspired them to want to ride horses. Not just ride horses, mind you, but to own one. You wouldn't believe it, one of them said, giggling. She said the guy smelled like hay, but in a sexy way. My wife and her friends thought it would be a brilliant idea to pool their money and buy a horse so they could have their own riding sessions. It seemed like a drunken fantasy, but they repeated it enough times for me to realize they were serious. I kept my cool, as I always do, but inside, I was dumbfounded. They were absolutely relentless. "It'll be so fun," my wife said, her eyes barely open, "and we'd save so much time not driving far to ride horses." It was the 5th time she'd brought up that brilliant horse plan. I decided the best course of action was to sober them up and defuse the situation. I went to the kitchen, brewed a strong pot of coffee, and handed cups to everyone. While they sipped, I called up a few of my friends to come and pick up their respective partners. One by one, the women were whisked away, leaving me alone with my wife, who passed out shortly after her coffee. The next morning, she woke up groggy but in better spirits. I sat her down and asked her point blank, "So, do you still want to buy a horse?" She groaned and waved her hand dismissively. "Don't remind me," she said, but then added, "You know, I actually wouldn't mind riding one. My life feels so monotonous lately. You and your friends are always on your computers. What about us?" There it was. Not the drunken chaos from the night before, but a genuine complaint. I wasn't about to dismiss her feelings, so I suggested, "Why don't you take that friend of yours and check out a place that has horses for rent?" Maybe there's a stable or a riding club nearby. To my surprise, she actually liked the idea. Her mood improved instantly. "That's brilliant," she said, grabbing her phone. Within minutes, she was on a call with her friends, excitedly explaining the plan. I overheard snippets of the conversation, and it was clear they were all just as enthusiastic. "We'll get a group together," she said, pacing the kitchen. "It'll be like a fun girls' day out." By the afternoon, things were moving faster than I expected. One of her friends had a connection to a nearby stable and decided to take charge of organizing the first session. It seemed like everyone was on board, and I have to admit, it was refreshing to see them so determined. For once, the plan seemed somewhat grounded in reality. At least they weren't talking about buying a horse anymore. Later that evening, my wife informed me that her friend had already reached out to the stable. "We've got a trial session booked for Saturday," she said, looking genuinely excited. She went on to explain how her friend had worked out the details and sent out a group message to confirm everyone's availability. I nodded, thinking to myself that this might actually be a good thing. It was structured, organized, and most importantly, not my problem. With the plan set in motion, I could see that my wife was happy. She spent the rest of the evening texting her friends, finalizing the details. I couldn't help but think about how different the night before had been compared to now. At least this time, there was no alcohol involved, and the talk of buying a horse had shifted to something more realistic. For now, that was a win in my book. Saturday morning came, and everyone was eager for the big day. My wife and her friends had spent the last few days texting non-stop about their upcoming horse riding adventure. We were supposed to meet the group at the stables by 10 a.m., but of course, we were the last to leave the house. As usual, she didn't hold back her criticism, blaming our tardiness on my extended bathroom breaks. I brushed it off, telling her, that's how all men are, which earned me a frustrated sigh. By the time we arrived, the others were already waiting, giving us exaggerated looks of mock impatience. The moment we stepped out of the car, we were greeted by one of the instructors, who happened to be a friend of my wife's friend. Alongside him were a couple of other men who introduced themselves as trainers. "Looks like we've got a big group today," he said with a cheerful tone. The women enthusiastically responded, shouting yes, while the men exchanged hesitant glances. The instructors chuckled knowingly. "Let me guess," one of them said, "your wives dragged you along." That got a laugh from the group, with the men reluctantly agreeing. We followed them inside, where the trainers helped everyone get into the appropriate gear. My wife and her friends were buzzing with excitement as they prepared for the trial lesson. The trainers explained the basics and demonstrated how to mount and control the horses. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until I noticed one of the instructors helping my wife onto her horse. His hands lingered just a little too long, and he stood a little too close. I frowned but kept my thoughts to myself for the moment. As the lesson progressed, it became clear that this wasn't a one-off incident. The same trainer continued to help my wife more than necessary, his hands brushing against her repeatedly. I wasn't the only one who noticed. A couple of the other husbands shot me knowing looks. We quietly agreed to address it after the session, but my patience was wearing thin. It wasn't just my wife, some of the other trainers were also getting a bit too friendly with the women in the group. When the women took a break from riding, we approached the instructors to have a word. "Could you guys ease up on the unnecessary touching?" one of us said, trying to keep it civil. One of the trainers immediately got defensive. "We're just doing our jobs," he shot back. Voices were raised, and the exchange started to escalate. Before it could turn into a full-blown argument, the women mounted their horses again, and we decided to let it go for the moment. However, tension lingered in the air. Towards the end of the lesson, my wife's horse began to move unexpectedly as she tried to dismount. She lost her balance and fell awkwardly to the ground. I rushed over to her, along with one of the trainers. She winced in pain and said she couldn't feel her leg properly. My frustration boiled over when the same trainer who had been overly familiar earlier muttered, "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't started that argument." I cut him off immediately, snapping, "If you hadn't been acting unprofessionally, none of this would have happened." The situation quickly turned serious as someone called for an ambulance. The paramedics arrived shortly, assessed her condition, and confirmed a minor fracture. "It's a clean break," one of them said, "but she'll need to be in a cast for 3 to 4 weeks." My wife was taken to the hospital, where they put her leg in a cast and gave her instructions for recovery. I stayed by her side the entire time, ensuring she was comfortable and taken care of. Once everything was settled, we headed home. The ride was quiet, with both of us lost in our thoughts. My mind raced, replaying the day's events and thinking about what needed to happen next. For now, my focus was on making sure she recovered smoothly, but the unresolved issues with the trainers were not something I planned to let slide. Back at home, the atmosphere was tense. My wife was in tears, her frustration bubbling over as she lamented about how she'd miss out on all the fun. While my friends are out there enjoying themselves, I'll be sitting on the sidelines like some useless beginner, she said, wiping her face angrily. "And it's all because you men had to start a fight over nothing." I took a deep breath, determined to stay calm, and replied, "It wasn't over nothing. Those instructors were getting way too familiar. I noticed it first, and then the other husbands did too. We spoke up because we needed to remind them that you all have husbands." She glared at me through her tears. "Idiots," she shot back. "Instead of watching out for us, you made things worse. Maybe if you had been paying more attention, I wouldn't have fallen." I'd expected her anger, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. I kept my response measured. "You're fine, aren't you? It's a minor injury. So what if you're off your feet for a couple of weeks? You can still learn the basics and be ready to join them once you're healed." She sniffled, acknowledging the logic in my words, but her mood didn't fully lighten. Over the next 2 weeks, she rested at home, flipping between boredom and mild frustration. One evening, as we sat on the couch, she turned to me with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "You won't believe what my friend told me," she began. "Apparently, they threw a swinger party at the stables while I've been stuck here." I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "What the hell? Who was there?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry, none of the married ones." "But can you imagine? It sounds wild, doesn't it?" "Wild?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "That's outright insanity. And for the record, that's cheating, not some wilder adventure." She rolled her eyes at my reaction. "Come on. We've done group trips before. Remember that massive house we rented? What's the difference?" I shook my head, incredulous. "The difference is that we all had separate rooms and respected boundaries. What they're doing is completely out of line. And at a stable, of all places? That's beyond disgusting." She shrugged, clearly unbothered by my perspective. "Well, I don't judge her for it. She's living her life and doing what makes her happy. It's not for everyone, but I don't think she's wrong for enjoying herself." I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around how casual she was about the situation. Deciding it wasn't worth an argument, I let the conversation drift to other topics. Still, her nonchalant attitude stuck with me. After a pause, I changed the subject. "So, when do you think you'll head back to the stables?" She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Probably this weekend," she said. "I'll meet up with the girls and see how things are going." I nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. Part of me wanted to push back, but I knew it would only lead to another argument. "All right then," I said simply, "just take it easy." She seemed content with the plan and returned to messaging her friends. Meanwhile, I sat there, silently piecing together everything she'd shared and deciding how to approach things going forward. There was no denying that this situation was getting increasingly complicated, but for now, I'd let her enjoy her moment. The weekend would come soon enough, and with it, more answers. I got home from work, ready to settle in for the evening, when I saw my wife preparing to leave. "Need a ride?" I asked, grabbing my keys. She shook her head. "No need," she said. "By the way, the trainers set a condition for our lessons." Her tone was casual, but the statement immediately caught my attention. A condition? I repeated. What kind of condition? They said we can't bring the husbands anymore, she replied nonchalantly. I blinked, trying to process what she'd just said. Apparently, some of you had a few arguments with them, and they've decided that it's better if you all stay away. Otherwise, they won't let us continue riding there. My eyebrows shot up. That doesn't strike you as odd? I asked. She sighed, clearly already annoyed by my reaction. What's odd is how you men act like teenagers fighting over your high school crushes. Don't you think it's time to grow up? We're all adults here. Her dismissive tone grated on me, but I let it slide. Fine, I said, watching as she grabbed her bag and left. As soon as she was out the door, I pulled out my phone and sent a message to the group chat with the other husbands. You guys heard about this new condition? I wrote. It didn't take long for the replies to pour in. What condition? One of them asked. I explained what my wife had told me, and the responses ranged from disbelief to outright anger. That's ridiculous, one of them wrote. What are they trying to pull? The conversation quickly escalated, and someone brought up the swinger party rumor that had been circulating. This is starting to feel off, another husband chimed in. First the weird behavior, now this. We need to figure something out. After some back and forth, we came to a consensus: the stables weren't the right place for our wives anymore. It wasn't just about the conditions, it was about the growing unease we all felt. One of the guys suggested finding a new stable as a surprise for the women, and the idea quickly gained traction. If we're going to do this, someone said, we need to make sure it's a good one. Something better than what they've got now. A quick search turned up a nearby facility with excellent reviews and a professional reputation. It seemed like the perfect solution. We agreed to visit the place first, just to make sure it was up to par. Once we confirmed it met our standards, we'd spring the surprise on the women. The plan came together quickly. We coordinated schedules and reached out to the new stable to arrange everything. It wasn't hard to convince the staff there to accommodate us, especially when we explained the situation. They assured us that their trainers were professionals who would respect boundaries. That reassurance alone made the effort feel worthwhile. As we finalized the arrangements, one of the husbands raised a concern. What if they don't like it? He asked. What if they're attached to the old place? The room fell silent for a moment before someone else chimed in. How could they not like it? We're solving their problem and giving them something better. It's a win-win. Everyone nodded in agreement, confident that this was the right move. The day of the big surprise had finally arrived, and my wife's cast had just been removed a few days prior. I decided it was time to unveil the plan. Get ready, I told her that morning. We've got a surprise for you and the girls. Just grab your things and hop in the car. She looked at me suspiciously, but complied. As soon as she was seated, I reached over with a blindfold. What's this? She asked, laughing nervously. Just trust me, I said, tying it gently around her head. We drove for a while, and as expected, the complaint started midway through the trip. How much longer? She grumbled. I'm getting car sick. I smirked and told her to hang in there. Patience is a virtue, I quipped, earning an annoyed groan from her. I stayed focused on the road, suppressing my amusement at her growing frustration. After what felt like an eternity to her, but was only about 40 minutes, we finally arrived. I parked the car and helped her out, guiding her to the spot where the other husbands and wives were already gathered. Okay, I said, taking off the blindfold, you can look now. She blinked a few times, adjusting to the sunlight, and then her jaw dropped. Before her stood a brand new stable, complete with a well-maintained riding arena and spacious pastures. The other women let out gasps of surprise and delight, but my wife turned to me, eyebrows raised. What is this? I crossed my arms and gestured to the stable. This, I said, is where you'll be riding from now on. We decided to switch things up. The trainers at the old place weren't exactly professional, so we found a better option. This place has great reviews, skilled instructors, and a no-nonsense atmosphere. The other husbands chimed in, backing me up. We just wanted you all to have a better experience, one of them added. The women huddled together, whispering and casting glances back at us. The men exchanged puzzled looks, wondering what could possibly take so much deliberation. After a few minutes, the wives returned, and my wife spoke on their behalf. All right, we'll give it a try. But there's one condition, she said, her tone firm. No more following us around and micromanaging. You trust us to handle ourselves, okay? I glanced at the other husbands, and we all nodded in agreement. Fair enough, I said, keeping my voice steady. With that settled, the women headed off to meet their new trainers and get started on the first lesson. It was clear from the start that these instructors were a world apart from the previous ones. They kept a respectful distance, offered clear instructions, and maintained a professional demeanor throughout the session. One of the other husbands leaned over and whispered, "Looks like it really was a trainer problem after all." I nodded in agreement, feeling a sense of relief. The lesson went smoothly, and by the end of it, the women seemed genuinely impressed with the new setup. The atmosphere was lighter, and the tension from the old stable felt like a distant memory. On the way home, my wife turned to me with a mix of annoyance and amusement. So, tell me the truth. You guys really moved us here because you were jealous, didn't you? I didn't even hesitate. Yeah, I admitted. We noticed those trainers were crossing the line, and this place doesn't have that problem. It's as simple as that. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Fine. Whatever. Let's just move on, she said, settling back in her seat. We rode the rest of the way in silence, finally pulling into the driveway as the sun began to set. It started with a subtle change in my wife's behavior. Over the course of a few evenings, I noticed that she was glued to her phone, scrolling and typing endlessly. It wasn't like her. Normally, she would watch TV with me or chat about her day, but now her attention was completely elsewhere. One night, I decided to ask her about it. "What's going on?" I said, nodding toward her phone. "You're on that thing non-stop. You've never been like this before." She barely looked up as she replied, "Oh, it's nothing. We've got a group chat with the girls from the stable. They share riding tips, schedules, and other stuff like that." Her answer sounded reasonable enough, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Later that night, I brought it up in the group chat with the other husbands. "Hey, guys, you notice your wives spending way more time on their phones lately?" I typed. The responses came quickly. "Yeah," one of them wrote. "Mine's constantly staring at her screen." Another chimed in, "Same here. I barely get 2 words out of her anymore." It seemed like we were all noticing the same trend. The chat soon shifted from casual observation to suspicion. "What are they even talking about in there?" someone asked. "Why are they so secretive about it?" The idea of finding out what was happening began to form. "We need to figure this out," one of the guys said. "Let's find a way to check their phones." While the suggestion seemed extreme, it didn't take long for everyone to agree. The plan was simple: we'd each find a way to look at our wives' chats. The next day, I spent hours brainstorming how to get into my wife's phone. She always had it locked, so I knew it wouldn't be easy. That evening, I stumbled upon a ridiculous but potentially effective idea online, using tape to capture her fingerprint while she was asleep. It sounded absurd, but I was willing to try. That night, I waited until she was in a deep sleep. Carefully, I pressed a piece of tape against her index finger, hoping it would work. To my amazement, the trick worked. With the tape, I unlocked her phone and opened the chat. For a moment, I felt like a spy in a bad movie. In the husbands group chat, they jokingly nicknamed me Agent 007, 0 brains, 0 patience, and 7 beers in. I had to admit, it was pretty accurate. As I scrolled through the messages, I found mostly mundane chatter, discussions about lessons, riding tips, and plans for group outings. But then something caught my attention. One of the trainers, the same guy tied to my wife's friend, was in the chat. Most of his messages seemed harmless, just casual small talk. However, one message from my wife's friend stood out. "We should meet up soon and discuss the plan," she had written. My heart skipped a beat. What plan? I scrolled further, but there was no explanation. Whatever they were talking about, they weren't being too open about it in the chat. I closed the phone and sat there, running through possibilities. Was it something innocent? Or was there more to it? The idea gnawed at me, and I couldn't let it go. The next morning, I decided I'd bring it up with her directly. For now, I shared my findings with the husband's group. They mentioned a plan. I typed, "I'm going to ask her about it tomorrow." The responses were a mix of curiosity and encouragement. Whatever was going on, we were all determined to get to the bottom of it. The next morning, as we sat down for breakfast, I decided to bring up the mysterious message I'd seen on her phone. "I noticed something on your phone last night," I began. "You and the girls were talking about some kind of plan. Care to explain?" She looked up from her coffee, not exactly surprised, but clearly not eager to answer. "It's nothing," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We're just working on something, but it's not ready yet. I'll tell you when it's finalized." Her vague response didn't sit well with me, but I decided to leave it alone for now. Instead, I messaged the husband's group chat. "My wife's being cagey about some plan they're working on. She says it's a secret. Anyone else hearing this?" The replies came in quickly, and everyone seemed to be on edge about the situation. "Let's play detectives," I suggested. "We need to figure out what's going on." One of the guys volunteered immediately. "I'll keep an eye on my wife today. She's meeting up with the group. I'll let you know what I find." True to his word, the designated spy followed his wife and kept us updated through the group chat. "They've just left the house," he wrote. "Headed out of town." The updates continued throughout the day, keeping all of us on edge. Finally, a message came through that made my stomach turn. "Guys, they're heading to the old stable." The chat exploded with questions. What? Why would they go there? Didn't we make it clear that place was off limits? The tension was palpable as we debated what to do. "Calm down," I wrote. "Let's wait and see what they're up to before jumping to conclusions." It wasn't easy to convince the others to hold back, but eventually, they agreed to wait for more information. Later that day, our scout reported that the women had left the stable, and he was heading home. "No idea what they were doing," he wrote, "but they seemed to be in a good mood." That evening, my wife returned home looking oddly smug. "Sit down," she said, motioning toward the couch. "I've got something to tell you." I crossed my arms and waited, already bracing myself. "We talked it over," she began, "and we decided to organize a swinger party at the stable." My jaw dropped. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, barely able to contain my disbelief. "That's why you went to the old stable today? To plan something like that?" She didn't even flinch at my reaction. "It was just a discussion," she said defensively. "Nothing's happened yet. We were just brainstorming. And honestly, why are you so upset? You guys are the ones acting like control freaks, following us around and spying." Her attitude only fueled my frustration. "We made it clear that the old stable was off limits for a reason," I said. "And now you're talking about doing something completely out of line there? What were you thinking?" "It was just an idea," she insisted. "Nothing's been finalized. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I shook my head, trying to keep my temper in check. "Listen to me carefully," I said. "If I find out that you or anyone else goes through with this or even steps foot in that stable again for something like this, we're done. No second chances, no excuses. Do you understand?" She finally looked shaken. "Okay," she said quietly. "I understand." A week passed uneventfully, with the women attending their lessons at the new stable. Everything seemed to be back on track. I kept a close eye on things, occasionally checking the husband's group chat to confirm that nothing unusual was happening. All clear, I wrote one day. Looks like they're sticking to the new place. The others echoed the same sentiment. It was a relief to see some normalcy return, but the tension from recent events still lingered. One evening, my wife came home visibly tired. Dropping her bag on the couch, she sat down with a heavy sigh. "Next weekend, I think I'm going to visit my mom," she said. She could use some help around the house, and it'd be nice to spend some quality time with her. Just us girls, you know? Reminiscing, gossiping, the usual. Her tone was casual, and her reasoning made sense. "Sure," I said, nodding. "Sounds like a good idea. Let me know if you need a ride." Later that night, as I relaxed with my phone, I sent a message to the group chat. "Hey, my wife's heading to her mom's next weekend. Thinking of having a few drinks and gaming while she's away. Anyone in?" The replies were immediate. "Count me out," one of the guys said. "My wife's going on a work trip that weekend." Another chimed in, "Mine's off to some meditation retreat for 2 days." A moment of silence hung in the chat before someone typed what we were all thinking. Wait a minute. Is it just me, or is it weird that all our wives are suddenly leaving for the weekend? The realization hit like a ton of bricks. This doesn't add up, another husband said. What are the odds they'd all have plans at the same time? The unease we'd felt earlier began to creep back in. The chat exploded with theories and questions. What if they're not going where they say they are, one of the guys suggested. What if this is another one of their secret plans? No one wanted to jump to conclusions, but the coincidences were too glaring to ignore. We need to figure this out, someone finally said. But we have to be careful. It didn't take long for a plan to form. Here's what we'll do, I wrote. When the weekend comes, each of us will quietly keep tabs on our wife's movements. Don't confront them, don't act suspicious, and whatever you do, don't let them know we're onto something. The group quickly agreed, understanding the need for discretion. We'll regroup and share what we find, I added. If it's nothing, great. But if it's something, we'll be ready. The unease in the group was palpable, but we all knew better than to panic. No overreacting, one of the guys reminded us. Just gather information and stay cool. It felt like a mission straight out of a spy movie, but the stakes were real. None of us wanted to jump to conclusions, but the coincidence was too strong to ignore. All right, then it's settled, I said as the plan took shape. When the weekend comes, everyone keeps a low profile and gathers intel. Let's see where this leads. The chat quieted as everyone processed the plan. Whatever was going on, we were determined to get to the bottom of it. For now, all we could do was wait and prepare. The day finally arrived, and we all set out, determined to uncover whatever our wives were hiding. Each of us had our suspicions, but nothing could have prepared us for where the trail led. Following discreetly, we tracked their movements to none other than the old stable, the very place we had agreed was off limits. When we regrouped in the parking lot, the mood was tense. This doesn't feel right, someone muttered. We all nodded in agreement, but there was no turning back now. We decided to wait and observe before making any moves. Let's give it 30 minutes, I said. If nothing suspicious happens, we'll leave and deal with this later. But if something's going on, we need proof. Everyone agreed, and I prepared my phone to record, just in case. The plan was simple, capture whatever unfolded on video for evidence. If it turned out to be innocent, we'd quietly walk away. But if it wasn't, we'd act immediately. The half hour felt like an eternity, but eventually, we saw enough movement to make us act. Quietly, we approached the stable, making sure to stay out of sight. I hit the record button on my phone and led the way inside. What we found was worse than anything I could have imagined. A swinger party was in full swing, and what was happening with the horses was unspeakable. I kept recording, my hand shaking with a mix of disbelief and fury. Amid the chaos, I spotted my wife. She was participating in one of the more absurd scenes, involving a giant carrot. I'll spare the details, but it was enough to make my blood boil. I motioned for the others to follow me, and we stormed into the room. The noise and activity stopped immediately as we made our presence known. Without hesitation, fists flew as we confronted the trainers responsible for this madness. After delivering a few well-placed punches, we turned our attention to our wives. I grabbed my wife by the arm and told her to get dressed, but she refused to listen, shouting obscenities at me instead. My patience snapped. "You're leaving now," I growled, pulling her along without giving her a chance to argue. She barely had time to grab a blanket to cover herself as I led her out of the building. The others followed, each dragging their respective wife in stunned silence. I didn't give her the chance to collect her belongings or even put up a fight. "Get in the car," I ordered as I opened the passenger door. She complied, muttering curses under her breath. I could feel her anger radiating off her, but I didn't care. What I had just witnessed was beyond any excuse or justification. The drive home was silent, save for the sound of her frustrated breathing. Once we were inside the house, the dam broke. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. "How dare you barge in like that? And how did you even know? Were you spying on me?" Her accusations were sharp and relentless, but I refused to back down. "How dare I?" I shot back. "After what I saw today, you have no right to question me." Her fury only grew as she tried to twist the blame back onto me. "You started this," she yelled, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "If you hadn't been so paranoid, none of this would have happened. This is all your fault." I stared at her, struggling to contain my anger. There was no reasoning with her in this state, and I knew any attempt to explain myself would fall on deaf ears. When we arrived home, I didn't waste any time. The moment we stepped through the door, I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed a few garbage bags, and started packing up her things. My movements were deliberate and cold. Clothes, shoes, cosmetics, everything went into the bags without a second thought. She stood in the doorway, watching in stunned silence at first, but it didn't take long for the shock to turn into rage. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You can't just throw me out like this." I didn't even look at her. "Watch me," I said flatly, tossing another pile of her belongings into a bag. Her anger escalated as she started shouting and trying to pull things out of the bags, but I was resolute. "You made your choice," I told her. "Now you're going to live with the consequences." Her aggression quickly shifted to desperation. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees, grabbing at my hands. "Please, don't do this," she sobbed. I made a mistake, I know that, but I was under so much pressure from my friends. I wasn't thinking straight. "I'll do anything to fix this. Please, just give me another chance." Her words were filled with emotion, but they didn't move me. I'd seen too much to be swayed by tears now. "It's too late for apologies," I said, my voice as firm as ever. "You think you can just say sorry and make this all go away? You don't even realize the depth of what you've done. You don't understand how much trust you've destroyed." She clung to me, begging for forgiveness, but I pulled away and continued packing. Each item that went into the bag felt like another step toward reclaiming my self-respect. As I finished gathering her things, I carried the bags to the front door and dropped them there. "Get out," I said, pointing toward the street. She looked at me in disbelief. "You can't do this. We're married," she screamed. "I'm your wife." I shook my head, my patience worn thin. "Not anymore," I said. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Her tone shifted again, this time to fury. "You're pathetic," she spat, grabbing the bags and storming out. "You think you're so righteous, but you're just as flawed as the rest of us." I didn't respond, simply shutting the door behind her and locking it. I leaned against the door for a moment, letting out a deep breath. The house was quiet now, the chaos replaced by an eerie calm. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. Once I had collected myself, I opened my phone and sent a message to the group chat. "It's done," I wrote. "She's out." The responses came quickly. One by one, the other husbands confirmed that they had taken similar actions. "Same here," one wrote. "She's gone, and good riddance." Another chimed in, this needed to happen. We couldn't let it slide. Finally, I attached the video I'd recorded at the stable and sent it to the chat. "Here's the evidence for the divorces," I wrote. "Use it if you need it. We're not letting them get away with this." There was a grim sense of solidarity among us as we prepared for the next steps. It wasn't just about ending the marriages, it was about reclaiming our dignity and moving forward without the shadows of betrayal hanging over us. The decision to divorce wasn't an easy one, but it was inevitable. After everything that had happened, there was no salvaging the relationship. For me, it wasn't just about ending the marriage, it was about ensuring that she faced consequences for her actions. If that meant stripping her of every advantage she'd gained during our time together, so be it. I began making arrangements with a lawyer, determined to proceed with a divorce that would leave her with nothing but her own mistakes. Even as I moved forward with legal steps, the thought of her continuing her activities at the stable gnawed at me. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore, it was about the sheer audacity of it all. She had already crossed so many lines, and the idea of her engaging in those disgusting acts again made my blood boil. I couldn't sit idly by, knowing what was happening there. Something had to be done. I decided to take action. After some research, I found the contact information for the stable's administration. I composed a brief but direct message, attaching the incriminating video as evidence. "You need to see this," I wrote. "This is what's happening at your facility. You should be ashamed of the lack of oversight. I suggest you address this immediately." With a deep breath, I hit send and waited for their response. It didn't take long. Within an hour, I received a call from the stable's management. The voice on the other end was tense but professional. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," they said. "We had no idea such activities were taking place. Rest assured, the trainers involved have already been dismissed, and we'll be conducting a thorough investigation to ensure this never happens again." Their swift action gave me a small sense of satisfaction. At least some justice was being served. Not long after, my phone buzzed with another call, this time from her. I could hear the anger in her voice before she even said a word. "How dare you?" she screamed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined everything. You're a pathetic excuse for a man, and everyone knows it now." She didn't even try to defend herself, she was too busy hurling insults and accusations. I let her rant, not saying a word until she finally paused to catch her breath. "Are you finished?" I asked calmly. The silence on the other end was deafening. "Good," I continued. "Because if this is the reaction you're giving me, then I know I made the right choice. You can scream and blame me all you want, but the fact remains, you did this to yourself. Don't call me again." With that, I hung up, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The group chat with the other husbands was buzzing that evening. I shared the update about the stable's swift action and the call from my soon-to-be ex-wife. "Looks like we got their attention," I wrote. The replies came quickly, filled with support and shared experiences. We had all been through similar turmoil, and now it felt like we were finally taking control of our lives again. As I sat back and reflected on the day's events, one thing became clear: I had done the right thing. Her outburst only confirmed that she was desperate to deflect blame and avoid accountability. The stable's response showed that the situation was serious enough to warrant immediate action. If my choices had rattled her and forced change, then I had no regrets. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of closure. The divorce process moved faster than any of us had anticipated. Each of us had secured top-notch lawyers, pooling our resources to ensure no stone was left unturned. The evidence we had gathered, the videos, the messages, the sheer audacity of their actions, left no room for negotiation. When it came time for court, the outcome was as clear as day. The ruling stripped them of any claim to assets or financial support, leaving them with little more than the clothes on their backs. Justice, at least in this sense, was swift and unrelenting. For us, this wasn't just about winning legal battles. It was about reclaiming dignity and peace of mind. The finality of the divorces brought a collective sense of relief. The toxicity that had consumed our lives for months, even years in some cases, was finally gone. Each of us stood taller, knowing that we had not only survived the ordeal but emerged stronger on the other side. It wasn't just about the property or the money, it was about closing a chapter that had weighed heavily on all of us. To celebrate, we decided to host a party, something light-hearted to mark the end of a dark period. The planning was spontaneous, as if we were all eager to move forward without hesitation. Beer, whiskey, and music flowed freely that evening, filling the air with laughter and camaraderie. For the first time in what felt like forever, we were able to enjoy ourselves without the burden of suspicion or betrayal hanging over our heads. The party wasn't just about indulgence, it was a statement. It was a moment to reclaim our happiness and to remind ourselves of what life could be like without the chaos we had endured. We shared stories, some funny, some painful, but all with the understanding that the worst was behind us. The unity among us was palpable. We weren't just individuals navigating personal struggles, we were a team, bonded by shared experiences and triumphs. It didn't take long for the calls to start. One by one, the ex-wives reached out, their tones ranging from apologetic to desperate. They wanted to explain, to justify, to beg for another chance. But none of us were willing to entertain their pleas. The betrayal had been too profound, the damage too permanent. Each of us responded in our own way, but the message was the same: there was no going back. The chapter was closed, and there was no room for their return. Their attempts to reach us became increasingly frantic. Some tried to involve mutual friends, hoping to soften our resolve. Others turned to guilt, reminding us of shared history and the good times that had once existed. But we stood firm. The clarity we had gained through this ordeal left no room for doubt. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. We had no intention of undoing the progress we had fought so hard to achieve. As the party wound down, we toasted to new beginnings. It wasn't just about celebrating the end of our marriages, it was about celebrating the start of something better. Each of us had plans for the future, free from the weight of deceit. Some talked about travel, others about pursuing hobbies they had long neglected. There was a collective sense of optimism, a belief that life could only get better from here. By the end of the night, as the last drinks were poured and the music faded, we knew we had done the right thing. The bonds we had formed through this experience were unshakable, forged in the fire of shared adversity. As we said our goodbyes and headed home, there was a sense of closure, of moving forward with clarity and purpose. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to shape.
I vividly remember meeting Julie for the first time on a rainy afternoon, just as I started a new job at her company. She was kind, funny, and her energy lit up every room. We quickly became inseparable and soon fell in love. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family, exactly how Julie wanted it. And it was perfect. Those were the happiest days of my life. But life can be cruel. Julie's sudden end of life in an accident devastated me, leaving me lost and heartbroken. It took years to heal. And just when I thought I'd never love again, I met Rachel. She brought joy back into my life and I began to move forward. Still, moving on was anything but easy. Now, preparing for my second marriage, I can't help but reflect on how simple my wedding to Julie was. This time, Rachel wanted a big, extravagant event. The details, like color-matching napkins and flower arrangements, were endless and exhausting, though I had little say. My mother-in-law Rachel and her friend Amber made the decisions, while my suggestions, inspired by my wedding with Julie, were ignored. I once told Rachel, yes, I loved Julie deeply, and losing her was unbearable. But that doesn't mean I should forget her or pretend she never existed. Rachel knew my past, and Julie would always be a part of me. Despite the chaos of wedding planning, everything seemed settled, except for minor details, like the color of the umbrella in case of rain or the car to take us from the church. At this point, the only things left unresolved seemed to be out of our control. I stayed silent about it, though. Everyone seemed happy with the wedding preparations, but I felt the need to reconnect with Rachel, who had grown distant. I figured it was the stress of the upcoming wedding. Rachel had always known about my past with Julie, and had helped me through my darkest times. She pulled me out of depression and back into life. She was even patient when I accidentally called her Julie during physical moments, though that happened less over time. I grew to love Rachel deeply, maybe as much as I had loved Julie. However, Rachel was sensitive when I suggested she dress like Julie, and she didn't want me to remove Julie's pictures from my home after she moved in. We also clashed over keeping some of Julie's things versus Rachel's desire to redecorate. It was tough, but we worked through it and grew closer, eventually leading to my proposal. Rachel said yes, but after a long, unsettling pause. I had thought she would be excited given how much she had pursued me. When she finally spoke, she said, "Yes, Alex, I want to marry you, but what?" I asked, accidentally calling her Julie again. She looked pained, and I quickly corrected myself, but the damage was done. "Alex, I know you've been through a lot, but I think you still love more than one woman," she said tearfully. I reassured her, promising that I loved only her. She cried, then accepted my proposal fully, but a shadow seemed to linger over us after that. It was hard to tell if it was because of the wedding stress or something deeper. To reconnect with Rachel, I planned a surprise wellness weekend. Her mood had been sour during the preparations, and I hoped the trip would help. I vowed not to mention Julie or any wedding details. When I told Rachel about the weekend, she smiled and kissed me, something that had become rare. "A romantic weekend? Oh, Alex, that's so sweet. Thank you," she said. Rachel seemed pleased, and I realized how tense I had been, fearing rejection. Luckily, the surprise hit the mark. "Oh, perfect. Just what we needed to fix things between us." "Yeah, the hotel's great. It has an amazing spa. Julie really loved the seafood restaurant here. You'll see, it'll be fantastic." Damn. I mentioned Julie again. I cursed myself, but Rachel just gave me a strange look. We arrived early, and despite the bad weather, everything was perfect. The hotel, the spa, and our room. I felt optimistic that this would help us reconnect. "This room is beautiful, Alex," Rachel said, looking around. "Yeah, once the weather clears, you can see the lake. It's really romantic," Alex replied. "Oh, how do you know?" Rachel asked, her tone curious. "I've stayed in this room before," Alex admitted. "Oh, you have?" she responded, a bit surprised. "Yeah, with Julie," Alex added, but stopped himself from saying more. "Oh." Rachel looked a bit stunned by the revelation. "You asked for this room," Alex reminded her, trying to ease the tension. "Yeah, I like it," Rachel replied, though her voice had lost some enthusiasm. "I see," Alex said, noticing her irritation. It frustrated him. Why did he have to deny his past with Julie? Rachel knew he loved her. Was it such a big deal to stay in the same room he had shared with his late wife? Shortly after they arrived, a snowstorm hit, and the front desk informed them they'd be stuck at the hotel for a few days. Alex didn't mind. It felt romantic, and he planned to enjoy time alone with Rachel, but she seemed less excited. "I just hope I can get back to work on time," Rachel said abruptly, which annoyed Alex. "Let's grab a bite to eat. The restaurant here is great," Alex suggested, trying to change the subject. They were seated at a nice table, one Alex had sat at before with Julie. "Let me guess, you sat here with Julie?" Rachel asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Yes, it has a nice view," Alex responded, trying to remain calm. "Maybe I should wear a wig," Rachel snapped. "A wig?" Alex repeated, confused. "Yeah, and dress like Julie," she said, her tone sharp. "Rachel, stop being ridiculous," Alex said, growing frustrated. "Alex, this has to stop," Rachel insisted, her voice firm. "You knew about my past from the start," Alex countered. "Yes, but I'm not going to relive your life with her. I want to make new memories, not live in Julie's shadow," Rachel said, her frustration clear. "Rachel, Julie is part of who I am," Alex explained, trying to make her understand. "So I have to share you with her for the rest of my life?" Rachel asked, her anger rising. "That's not what I mean," Alex started to say. "Well, I guess I'll have to deal with it. But if sharing is the deal, you'd better learn something about it too," Rachel shot back, her voice full of anger. I could tell Rachel was struggling with the situation, and I should have been more diplomatic, but it was a sore spot for me too. Before I could say anything, she left the table. I decided to follow her to the buffet, intending to talk and reassure her. She was already in line, chatting with a tall, handsome guy who was clearly interested. They laughed, touched hands, and looked like a couple. I don't usually get jealous, but this was unsettling. They filled each other's plates, giggling like teens, and then sat at a small table for two. I felt a rush of unease, but joined them anyway. "Hi, I'm Alex, Rachel's fiancé," I introduced myself, extending a hand. The guy ignored me completely, which hurt. Rachel giggled, clearly trying to get under my skin. "Rachel, what's going on?" I asked, annoyed. She and the guy, Danny, kept talking and laughing while I sat there, humiliated. Rachel didn't mention me or our wedding, and I grew more frustrated as they bonded over work and family. "You're an amazing woman, Rachel. I'm glad we met," Danny said. "And I can't believe you're here alone, Danny. I'm glad we're snowed in. It's going to be great," Rachel replied, flirting openly. "Rachel," I shouted, but she ignored me. Then she leaned over and kissed him, leaving me stunned. The entire restaurant gasped. I felt utterly humiliated. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I was furious. Rachel continued playing this cruel game, and when she suggested going to his room, Danny looked surprised but willing. They left together, leaving me alone and humiliated. I returned to our room, too stunned to think straight. Hours passed, and I couldn't shake my anger, hurt, and doubts about the marriage. Eventually, I asked the front desk for Danny's room number. They couldn't tell me directly, but hinted it was 107. I went outside, found their room, and saw them cozy on the couch. At least they were fully clothed. I took a picture. They spotted me, waved, and kissed again, clearly mocking me. I took another photo and left, unable to watch any longer. I was crushed, questioning everything about our relationship. Later that night, I saw them in the restaurant, acting like a couple, hugging, kissing, enjoying themselves. I took more pictures, then ordered room service to avoid further humiliation. I waited for Rachel to return and make things right, but she never did. Around 10 p.m., I went back to check their room. The curtains were mostly closed, but I could still see through the gaps. They were kissing again, and then things escalated. I kept taking photos, trying to stay calm, even though it was unbearable. Finally, when they finished and cuddled on the couch, I left, freezing and heartbroken. I went back to our room, cried, pounded the bed in frustration, uploaded the photos to my cloud, and finally fell asleep after taking some sleeping pills. I woke up around 9, with Rachel sitting in a chair, watching me quietly. Neither of us said a word. I wasn't angry anymore, just sad. Thoughts of what could have been ran through my mind. She didn't even look remorseful, just content, as if unaware or indifferent to the impact of her actions. Maybe this had been her plan all along. "Are you feeling better now?" she asked. "No. I'm going to spend the day with Danny until we leave. My stuff is already in his room. After that, I'll be yours again. Unless you mention Julie," she said calmly. "No," I replied in the same tone. "Enjoy yourself." She left without another word. I couldn't believe how arrogant she'd become. Maybe I had misjudged her all along. She didn't want to end the relationship, just teach me a lesson. Sure, I'd been careless mentioning Julie, but her reaction was extreme. It was over between us. Stuck at the hotel, I felt trapped and humiliated, desperately wanting to escape. My mind kept spiraling, and I knew I needed a distraction. As I headed for breakfast, Michael from the front desk stopped me. "You don't have to stay here. The roads will open for a short time today. Follow the supply truck, and you'll be able to leave before the next storm hits." "Thank you, Michael." I meant it, and tipped him generously. The idea of escape lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I packed up, checked out, and followed the delivery truck to the highway with no issues. The drive home was long, and I struggled to process everything that had happened. One thing was clear. There would be no wedding. I canceled everything: the venue, the caterer, the DJ, and sent out simple wedding cancellation notices. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we regret to inform you that our wedding has been canceled. I didn't feel the need to air the dirty details. I also reached out to the San Francisco company I'd turned down because of Rachel. They welcomed me back, saying, "Come here, Alex. We'll find you a place and the job is still yours. Sounds like your ex did you a favor." I wasn't ready to laugh about it yet, but I was relieved. If this had happened 6 months into marriage, it would have been much worse. The pain of losing someone I loved was real, but her betrayal made moving on easier. A whole new life was ahead of me, and for the first time I felt like I truly dodged a bullet. I quit my job, packed my car, and left our apartment. On a whim, I even peed in her underwear drawer, though it didn't feel good afterward. Just a childish act to show my frustration. The drive to San Francisco would take 4 or 5 days, and I looked forward to the solitude and time to reflect. After 2 days of anger and resentment, my phone rang as I started my trip. "Alex, it's Rachel. Thank God the roads are clearing," Rachel said. Alex regretted answering. All the anger surged back, and he stayed silent. "Alex, are you there?" Rachel asked, her voice tense. "Yes," Alex replied flatly. "Did you cancel the wedding?" "My parents called," Rachel said, her tone anxious. "Yes, of course. What did you expect? That I'd still marry you?" Alex responded, his frustration evident. "Alex, please. I was just hurt about the Julie thing and made a mistake. I'm yours now. Nothing has to change," Rachel pleaded. "Maybe, but that person won't be me," Alex said coldly. "What?" Rachel asked, shocked. "I don't care how you justify it. We're done," Alex stated firmly. "Alex, please come get me. We need to talk," Rachel begged, her voice breaking. "No, I'm not your responsibility anymore, and I'm not in the neighborhood," Alex replied dismissively. "Where are you?" Rachel asked, desperate. "Kearney, Nebraska. I'm heading to California, starting a new life without you," Alex said, his voice resolute. Rachel began to sob, but Alex hung up. When the phone rang again, he blocked her number. He resumed his journey, though the anger still lingered. An hour later, the phone rang again. "Alex speaking?" Alex answered, sounding tired. "Hey, Alex, it's Carl, Rachel's father. Did you cancel the wedding?" Carl asked, his tone concerned. "Yeah, or, more accurately, Rachel did with her behavior," Alex replied. "What happened?" Carl asked. "She flirted with a guy right in front of me, kissed him, went to his room, and spent the weekend with him. The whole hotel knew," Alex explained, his voice tinged with bitterness. Carl was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry, Alex, you're right. She's not ready for marriage. I apologize on her behalf," Carl said regretfully. "No hard feelings, Carl. I always liked you and Sue," Alex replied, softening his tone. "What will you do now?" Carl asked. "I'm heading to San Francisco to start fresh," Alex said. "Good luck, Alex. You're a good man," Carl said sincerely. "Thanks, Carl. Goodbye," Alex replied, ending the conversation. That call hurt. My future had fallen apart in just days. Friends called during the drive, and though I didn't share details, most seemed to understand the breakup. Eventually, the calls stopped, and I focused on starting my new life. But it wasn't easy. My thoughts kept drifting back to Rachel, the good times, and that awful weekend. After 2 months in San Francisco, my doorbell rang one Friday evening. Expecting Jehovah's Witnesses, I reluctantly opened it, but it was worse. Rachel, looking beautiful and nervous. I immediately slammed the door. She rang again, but I turned off the doorbell. How did she find me? I knew I couldn't avoid her forever, so I reopened the door, but she was gone. Good. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. Still groggy, I opened it, and there she was. I let her in without a word, resigned to the inevitable conversation. We sat in silence, sipping coffee. She had clearly made an effort to look exactly how I liked, but my feelings for her were gone. This realization made me calm. "Alex," she whispered, struggling to speak. "I'm sorry." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. "I've been awful, and I'm sorry it took so long to find you. You can mention Julie whenever. It's something I'll just have to live with. I was insecure and thought you didn't really love me, that I was just a substitute. You kept pictures of her everywhere. You called me Julie sometimes, and she was always in your mind during wedding planning. Taking me to that spa where you'd been with her, it was too much. I snapped, and I'm sorry." I nodded, understanding. I should have been more sensitive, but that doesn't justify humiliating me and cheating on me. "I know," she said, tearing up. "I've regretted it every day." We sat in silence, unsure of what to do next. "How did you find me?" I asked. "All our friends know your address, but none wanted to tell me. I tricked someone by borrowing their phone," she admitted. I was glad my friends had my back. "I gave up our apartment and my job. I rented a place nearby and am looking for work." I was surprised by what Rachel said, but it didn't change anything for me. Her news didn't make me happy. It just meant she'd be around, making things harder. Still, I felt strong enough to resist her. "Alex, I know I hurt you at the hotel. I did it on purpose and humiliated you in public. I pushed you away, and you had no choice but to leave. At first, I didn't understand why I did it. I loved you then, and I still do. I didn't care about Danny. He was attractive, but I didn't even like him. I tried to convince myself it was about teaching you a lesson, but deep down, I knew I just wanted to hurt you. So, what was the real reason? Alex asked, his voice calm but probing. My dad thinks I was just jealous, Rachel admitted softly. Jealous of a dead woman? Alex asked, incredulous. You always talked about Julie like she was perfect, the most beautiful, flawless woman. I felt like I couldn't compete with her. I was so intimidated by her memory that I didn't even want to accept your proposal, even though it was my dream, Rachel confessed, her voice cracking. Rachel, I'm sorry for making you feel that way, Alex said, guilt creeping into his voice. Julie wasn't perfect, and we had our arguments, but I didn't think it was right to mention those after she died. I shouldn't have put her on a pedestal in front of you. Oh, Alex, Rachel sobbed and lunged toward him, seeking comfort. Wait, Alex stopped her gently. I said you could compete with her in the past, but now my view of you is tainted. Alex, she whispered through her tears, give me a chance to prove you wrong. I'll be patient. I'll stay by your side until you trust me again. You can still talk about Julie, and I'll learn to live with it. I don't know. It's not that simple, Alex replied, shaking his head. I'll do whatever it takes, no matter how long, Rachel pleaded, her determination growing. Quite the speech, Rachel. I believe you, Alex said calmly, though his neutral tone confused her. How do you feel about me? She asked, almost in a whisper. I still love you. I haven't been with anyone since that night. I think I've mostly forgotten you, though. I'm not mad anymore, Alex admitted. But I also don't love you anymore. Rachel flinched at his words, but quickly regained her composure. That's bad, but I can work with it. You loved me once. Maybe you'll fall in love with me again. Rachel, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Your reaction was completely out of proportion. What's next if I forget to take out the trash? Hire a hitman? Trust isn't even a goal for me right now. I swear I'll never be that stupid again. If we get back together, I'll sign a contract. If you leave me, I get nothing. No money, no kids, nothing. Kids? I laughed, surprised. Yes, if we ever get back together. Here's the contract, she said, handing me a document. I was shocked to see how harsh it was. If we broke up, she'd get nothing, not even visitation rights. I doubted it was even legal. Did Carl help you write this? Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, is it that obvious? Rachel admitted, a bit embarrassed. Well, I don't want to be with you because of a contract. And the real issue remains. I don't love you anymore. I don't trust you. I'm not even sure I like you, Alex replied, his tone firm. That last comment seemed to sting. I don't even like myself, Rachel admitted softly. I get that. You hurt me deeply for no reason, Alex said, shaking his head. Alex, how about this? Show me around San Francisco. We can just be friends and you can see how things go, Rachel suggested, trying to find a middle ground. Alex paused, considering her offer. He wondered if avoiding Rachel would feel like running away, and that would seem weak. The truth was, he still liked her, even if he didn't trust her, and he didn't want to hide. Plus, he had no friends in San Francisco, so her company might be welcome. Spending time with her would prove to him that he was over her. I don't know the city that well either, but I can show you what I know, Alex replied finally. Thanks, Alex, Rachel said, smiling as she headed to the kitchen to make breakfast, humming confidently. Alex didn't mind her being around, but he knew there was no chance of them getting back together, contract or no contract. Over the next few weeks, Rachel eagerly sought time with Alex, often wearing revealing outfits and finding excuses to touch him. Once, while wearing a loose t-shirt, she kept leaning forward, practically offering a view of her cleavage, but Alex wasn't interested. He looked everywhere but at her chest, smiling inwardly as she tried harder to catch his attention. Eventually, he left the room to stop himself from laughing. Another time, she wore hot pants so short they resembled a bikini bottom, pairing them with stiletto heels. She spent the day bending over in front of him, pretending to look for something. Rachel, are you looking for something? Can I help? Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I'm fine. Just thought I lost an earring, she replied, clearly frustrated. When they went shopping together, Rachel found every excuse to press her body against Alex, but he pretended not to notice, enjoying the irony of her frustration. She was clearly hot for him, but he kept rejecting her advances, probably hurting her ego. Alex felt a little sorry for her, but he wasn't going to sleep with her just to make her feel better. She was trying to win him back in cheap ways, and it wasn't working. Weeks later, they sat in Alex's living room, and Rachel's advances had slowed down. Suddenly, she asked bluntly, Alex, when are you going to entertain me again? What? Alex asked, caught off guard by her directness, though he knew exactly what she meant. You know you can have me, right? Just for fun, no strings attached. I'm on the pill, clean and free, Rachel said, her voice suggestive. I didn't know how to let her down gently. She was beautiful, but she was still Rachel, the same Rachel who had told me, "It's already decided. Try to have a good time." While I was lost in thought, she pulled off her sweater, revealing a t-shirt underneath with big text saying, "Alex's girlfriend." She turned around to show the same words on the back. "Nice, huh?" she said, smiling. "Yes," I replied, still shocked. "I bought 20 of these. I plan to wear them everywhere. I know it's not true yet, but I want to show my commitment. However, I need your approval to wear them in public." Her eyes sparkled with hope, waiting for me to agree. I shook my head. "That's impossible. Let's just be friends, okay?" Her face fell, and her eyes watered, but she stayed strong. "Okay, Alex, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push. I'm surprised I can even spend time with you again, but that's all I'm willing to do." "I understand," she said, looking utterly disappointed. "Alex, I have time. I have no other plans. I'll keep working to get you back. I'll be patient. You can even glorify Julie if you want. I'll learn to live with it." I sighed, unsure how to respond. I didn't want to hurt Rachel or seek revenge, but I also didn't want her holding on to false hope. Still, she kept hanging around, clearly wanting more, though she didn't push too hard. Her hopes were high, but I remained determined not to start a real relationship with her. I told her as much, but it didn't stop her efforts. One night I got home late and was frustrated the light was out again. Stumbling in the dark, I accidentally kicked something soft. I used my phone's flashlight and saw a small woman curled up on the floor. Confused, I carried her inside. She was dirty but seemed healthy, so I put her in the guest room, covered her with blankets, and went to bed. I woke up unexpectedly in the middle of the night, not because of my alarm, but because of something pleasant. I should have told her to stop, but all I managed was a weak, yeah. We had sex, and before I knew it, she disappeared back into the guest room. It was over as quickly as it started, leaving me wondering if it had even happened. The next morning, I heard her humming in the shower. She was thin but had a pretty face and seemed relaxed while eating breakfast. We didn't talk about the night before. After eating, she got dressed, said, "You're a nice guy," and left without a trace. I was stunned. I had just slept with a woman whose name I didn't even know. Then when I found a needle in the trash, a chill ran down my spine. Panic set in as I realized we hadn't used protection. I immediately went to the doctor, who told me I didn't have any detectable STDs but needed to wait for some results. I swore I'd think before acting next time. Meanwhile, Rachel continued pushing for more, but I couldn't see myself being with her again. I still found her attractive, but the love I once felt was gone. She wisely kept her marriage and kids' talk to a minimum, knowing too much pressure would push me away. We spent time together as friends, and while she hoped for more, I knew it was never going to happen. Months later, Rachel and I were about to have dinner when the doorbell rang. She jumped up to answer it, always eager to assert herself as if she were still my partner. I let her, realizing I'd been keeping her around for companionship while never fully clarifying that we wouldn't get back together. Despite her beauty and the fact she could be with someone else, she remained determined to win me over. When the door opened, I turned to see the woman I'd met months earlier standing there, still thin, except for her noticeably large stomach. Rachel looked surprised but quickly understood the implications of the woman's visit and her condition. "Please come in," Rachel said quietly. "Join us for dinner. I'm Rachel." "Annie," the woman mumbled, uninterested in pleasantries. Annie sat down without hesitation and began eating. "I'm pregnant," she said bluntly, confirming what we had guessed. "It's yours," she added, pointing her fork at me. I stared at the steak on her fork, trying to process it. "You're the only one I've had unprotected sex with," she continued, as if discussing the weather. I was too shocked to respond. Rachel, however, stayed calm. "Really? The only one?" I muttered, still in disbelief. "That's hard to believe." "Nevertheless, it's true," Annie replied, unfazed. "Don't worry. I want to work things out. I like you, and I don't want trouble. Funny thing is, I don't even know your name." "I'm Alex," I said weakly. "Nice to meet you. It was fun having sex with you," she grinned. Rachel even chuckled a bit. "Alex, you slept with her without knowing her name?" Rachel asked, surprisingly calm. "Yeah, I guess so." "So? What now? Do you want infanticide?" Rachel asked. "No, it's too late. I've seen the ultrasounds. It's a baby now, and I can't end her life, Annie replied, her tone more serious. Rachel didn't miss a beat. No problem. We'll adopt her. What? I dropped my fork, completely shocked. Rachel turned to me. Shut up, Alex. This is a woman's matter. This could have been my baby if I hadn't messed up. I tried to speak, but Rachel was already making decisions. Annie nodded, agreeing with Rachel's plan. You can't raise a child while using pills, Rachel said firmly. Annie hesitated, then admitted, You're right. I've been on hard substances for a while, and I'm not sure I can stop, even for my baby. My life is a mess. The mood turned somber. Rachel remained composed. Keeping you off pills is Alex's job. You'll live here, stay clean, and I'll adopt the baby. After that, you're free. Annie thought for a moment, then agreed. Okay, deal. Rachel extended her hand, and Annie shook it. Just like that, my fate was sealed. I got up and cleared the dishes while the two women made plans for my life. Annie was set to stay in the guest room, and Rachel began staying over more frequently. Though Rachel hinted we'd be a couple again, I stayed quiet, grateful for her help, but uneasy with how things were unfolding. The next morning, we moved Annie's things from her old place to my apartment. Her previous place was so bad I wouldn't have parked my car there. Wow, your life's been rough, huh? Alex asked while packing. Yeah, and it's about to get worse, she replied with a smirk. Hey, I'm not that bad, Alex joked, trying to lighten the mood. Ever heard of cold turkey? She asked, her tone turning serious. Not the food, right? Alex quipped. Nope, get your guest room ready. There'll be vomit and it'll be hell, she said bluntly. Well, hopefully my daughter will appreciate it someday, she added with an ironic smile. Our daughter, Alex corrected, surprising even himself with the words. Really? She asked, tears filling her eyes. Our daughter, Alex repeated firmly. You're not alone. Oh, Alex, thank you. She hugged him tightly, though Alex noticed her glancing warily at Rachel. Later she asked, Do you have vacation left? I can take 2 weeks unpaid, Alex responded. The first 3 days will be the worst, she warned. What should I expect? Alex asked, preparing himself. All the good stuff, she said sarcastically. Vomiting, sweating, shaking, screaming at you, trying to escape. I'll hate you. Got it, Alex said, resigned to what was coming. And that's exactly what happened. Twice she nearly escaped while I cleaned her bathroom. I ended up with scrapes and bruises and the room was wrecked. She screamed a lot, but we survived the first 3 days. By then, I was familiar with all her bodily functions, and none of it was remotely pleasant. I sat by her bed, exhausted, looking at the trembling, vomit-covered mess. I didn't feel noble, just tired and dirty, helping a woman I'd carelessly impregnated. The whole thing was awkward, gross, and depressing, and I barely noticed the smell of vomit anymore. Her erratic sleep schedule left me equally sleep-deprived. A few hours later, she was up and pacing. The worst is over. I need to be alone now. I'll take a walk. Anna, you can't leave yet. 2 weeks, then you're free. Let me go, she screamed. No, Anna. She shifted to pleading. Please, I need something to ease the pain. Let's get something to eat, I suggested, trying to calm her. Okay, she said, but suddenly made a run for the door. Luckily, she couldn't open it. It pushed instead of pulled. After that, I remembered to lock it, just to be safe. A few days later, she looked much better. Her eyes were clear again, and she seemed to have regained her composure. She was also sweating and shivering less, though she was still too thin. Now that her hair wasn't piled up and her skin wasn't so shiny, she was looking quite beautiful again. The worrying part was her attachment and emotional instability, which made me a bit uneasy. I couldn't tell if it was due to the pregnancy or the withdrawal, but she suddenly started touching me constantly, hugging and kissing me. That is, when she wasn't sitting in the corner crying or laughing. I couldn't fully avoid her emotional swings. When she was sad, it hurt me. When she was goofy, I usually joined in. When she was clingy, I enjoyed the closeness of this pretty woman. And when she was suddenly turned on, you can guess what happened. Suddenly, we were back in bed together, having sex again. It was intense, full of need and desire. I hadn't realized how much I wanted this little woman until now, but I really, really needed to have her, and I was sure she felt the same. It seemed like her withdrawal, with all the vomiting, shaking, screaming, and yelling, had somehow bonded us. I was still aware I was having unprotected sex with a courtesan again, despite my promise not to be that stupid anymore. But at least she couldn't get pregnant again. And surprisingly, I never felt like I was with a hooker. She was actually pretty shy and even cried a little afterward, clinging to me like a burr. I didn't mind, not one bit. We sat on the bed afterward, me feeling satisfied and still a little surprised. "So I guess you don't hate me as much anymore, huh?" I asked. "Don't be so sure, mister. That was still my bad side. Wait until you see me at my best." "No, really. I think I've beaten my demons now, and I'm starting to think straight again. No, I never hated you. You were just trying to help me and our baby, and I'm grateful for that." She smiled cheekily. She was very charming, and she was getting prettier every time. If this kept up, I'd have to fight guys off with a stick. Wait, what? Why do I feel like I need to protect her? Did I really think she was my woman? I decided to deal with this problem with a proven tactic, procrastination. In the weeks that followed, the Spencer family seemed very relaxed. Annie and I got to know each other surprisingly well. Being sick and getting yelled at seemed to have created a strong bond between us. It helped that I was no longer stuck in the role of prison warden. We grew closer every day, laughing a lot and having sex. I even noticed a few glances in my direction that might have been longing. Yeah, honestly, I was starting to look at her the same way. Of course, Rachel still visited us regularly, and she didn't miss the changes. "Alex, you two aren't developing some kind of love relationship, are you?" she asked. "I'm not sure, Rachel. We're definitely getting closer." She looked completely shocked. "Alex, don't do this to me. I feel like I'm so close to getting you back. Don't let me lose you to that fool, okay? Rachel, you know that." Yes, I know. I'm not asking for anything. You can do whatever you want, but you know I still haven't given up hope. Alex, I'm going to keep fighting for you. I won't give up, even if it takes decades." I just sighed and let the matter drop because Annie had walked into the room. I knew Rachel was struggling, but I was starting to see Annie as my girlfriend now. And I'm definitely a one-woman man. Annie and I grew even closer as I made sure she stayed away from pills, went with her to checkups, bought tons of baby supplies, and did everything else parents do to prepare for a new baby. We acted like a normal couple, and that's exactly how it felt to me. After our daughter Mel was born, everything became clearer. Annie, Mel, and I were a family, no question about it. The idea of giving Mel up for adoption now seemed absurd. Of course, we were going to keep her. Rachel noticed all of this during her frequent visits. "Alex, I've lost you forever, haven't I?" she asked. "Yes, Rachel. What we had is over." "Alex, please," she sobbed. "This isn't fair. I know I completely screwed up that weekend, but I did everything I could to make things right. Doesn't that count for something?" "I don't know if it's fair. I belonged to you exclusively, but you were the one who separated us for no good reason. That meant we were both free to be with someone else, and that's what happened. It's not about fairness, and it wasn't intentional. There's no set price for what you did that weekend. You threw a bomb between us, and you never know which direction will be blown. In my case, it led me to Annie." "Alex!" She was openly sobbing now. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. "Rachel, you're still young and beautiful. Go find the right man, and don't do anything like that again, okay?" "No, Alex. I'll wait for you." "No, don't." There was nothing I could do. I sighed. She was right. If she had chosen to throw her life away, that was tragic. But I couldn't stop her. That's how things ended with Rachel. It was sad because I once loved her, and things could have been great. But I didn't love her anymore. And she didn't love me either. I was starting to fall for Anna. No, actually, I was already completely in love with her. Her awkward, innocent, and charming ways, her sweet face, and her complete devotion to me. She practically worshipped me. The biggest difference with Rachel was that I actually trusted Anna, which was strange. I trusted a former pill dependent and courtesan, but couldn't bring myself to trust my ex-wife, who had only been wild for one weekend. The next few years brought us a small civil wedding, raising Mel, Rachel's disappearance, thankfully, and no recurring pill issues. Life with Anna wasn't always easy, of course. She still had major mood swings, but by then, I knew her well enough to handle it. The deep love we had for each other helped too. Mel was amazing. She had me wrapped around her little finger. Everything fell apart shortly after Mel's second birthday. I just put Mel to bed while Anna was still out shopping. Mel had worn me out again, and I collapsed on the couch, ready to zone out in front of the TV like usual. The doorbell rang the moment I sat down. Annoyed, I got up and opened the door. 2 policemen stood there. "Good evening. How can I help you?" "Good evening, Mr. Spencer. I'm Sergeant Jacobs. Are you married to Anna Spencer?" "Yeah. What's wrong?" I asked, suddenly feeling anxious. "Mr. Spencer, I am very sorry to inform you that we found your wife dead. Would you please come with us?" I didn't understand the rest. I collapsed. I'd kissed her goodbye just 2 hours ago. Was that the last time Mel or I would ever see her alive? Was she really never coming back? Would I never hear her laugh again? Never kiss her? Never hear her curse when she stepped on my foot? Never feel her snuggle into me? Never smell her scent again? Annie, where are you? What happened? Why? After who knows how long, a policeman shook me. Mr. Spencer, are you all right? Should we call an ambulance? No, I'm fine. It turned out she had died of a massive hard substances overdose. I had no idea she was still using. One of the officers casually mentioned he knew her, said she worked part-time as a courtesan and was too experienced with pills to make such a fatal mistake. They were sure she had eliminated herself. I was stunned. I didn't know. I barely knew her. She had been living a double life. Within days, I was shattered, unable to work, struggling to take care of Mel. A week after her end of life, I sat on the couch again, staring blankly at the TV, crying occasionally, feeling lost and incapable of handling the situation, emotionally and practically. Mel was crying again, which had become normal. Losing Annie devastated me and created a host of practical problems. My time off was almost over, and I needed to return to work. How was I going to take care of Mel? I had no family nearby and no one to rely on. Could I hire a babysitter? Could I trust anyone? Most of the people I trusted had deceived me in some way. Yeah, even Anna. Thinking back, she loved me, but she also deceived me. She lived a double life as a courtesan and pill dependent while I was at work or away on business. And now she had left me and Mel without a word or explanation. Ding dong. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It had been ringing for a while. Mel was still crying. I felt completely overwhelmed. By Anna's end of life, by Mel's constant crying, by the weight of everything. I had tried to feed her and failed again, and I couldn't rock her to sleep. I felt helpless. Ding dong. The door or Mel? I had no idea what to do with Mel, but the door gave me a clear task. I could walk over, open it, and see who was there. So I did, and instantly regretted it. No, please, no more complications. My life's hard enough as it is, I muttered. It was Rachel. No, was all I managed to say. You look awful. I'm so sorry, Alex. It must have been terrible, she said softly, stepping in and hugging me. Strangely, I felt nothing. After 2 years apart, this was the woman I almost married. Yet I felt nothing. Shouldn't I feel something? Anger, sadness, anything? But there was only awkward indifference. Or maybe I was just too exhausted. She didn't seem to notice. Finally, she let go and carried the large bag she had with her into Mel's room. Hey, I weakly protested, but followed her into the room, too exhausted to resist. She picked up Mel from the bed, gently rocked her, and hummed a quiet tune. Amazingly, Mel started calming down. After a while, she seemed completely content, which astonished me. Rachel carefully laid her back in bed, covered her up, and then walked straight into the kitchen as if she lived here, unloading her bags and preparing food for Mel. How did you... I started. I've read all about it. What? When? When I heard about Anna's end of life. I knew right away that you'd be in trouble, Alex, she said matter-of-factly, though I noticed her stealing quick glances in my direction, betraying her calm exterior. Do you still live in the neighborhood? Of course. I never moved. And no, I'm not dating anyone. Yes, I've been watching you. No, I haven't had a man since that weekend when I ruined my life. She turned to face me, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, I still love you, she whispered, and then quickly left the room. I followed her to Mel's room and watched as she rocked and fed her. Damn, why wasn't Mel crying? Usually when I tried, the entire neighborhood needed earplugs. Rachel handled Mel effortlessly. She had come prepared. After a while, she turned to me again. What's your plan, Alex? I'll take care of you, she continued before I could answer. I'll always be here for you, always. I stayed in the background so I wouldn't interfere with your marriage. But now that you're struggling, I have to step in. That was quite a declaration. This woman had clearly made up her mind to dedicate her life to me, which was remarkable. Was it love or guilt? Could guilt drive someone to wait patiently for 2 years and then rush to help like this? What do you mean? Alex asked, feeling more confused than ever. I quit my job, she announced. You what? Alex replied, shocked. How else can I take care of you and Mel? You need a full-time nanny, and Mel needs me too, she said with a smile. To Alex's surprise, he found himself laughing for the first time in ages. She was right. Have you eaten anything? She asked, concerned. Since when? Alex responded. Since Anna's end of life, she said softly. I don't remember, Alex admitted. All right, Mel's fed. Now it's your turn. Just sit on the couch, she instructed. Alex did as she said, sitting down and realizing how grateful he was for her presence. Having someone to talk to, someone to fend off the loneliness and helplessness was a huge relief. He could hear her rattling pots and pans in the kitchen. After a while, she returned with a plate of food. "Feeling better?" she asked, handing him the plate. "Yes, less lonely. And you're right. I do need help with Mel. Thank you. But what about your job?" Alex asked, still processing everything. "Alex, for 2 years I haven't had a life. I haven't gone out or spent much. I've just stayed in my little apartment. The only thing I spent money on was the gym," she explained. "You? The gym?" Alex asked, surprised. "Yes, I wanted to. Well, I'll explain later." She blushed a little. "Anyway, I've saved up a lot. I can live for almost a year without working. We'll figure things out before then," she assured him. "Oh," Alex said, feeling like he'd been thrown a lifeline but unsure how to respond. "Yes, I'll take care of you. In a year you'll know what to do with your life. Maybe you'll meet someone new. Maybe you'll reconsider other options," she said with a small smile. "Oh, I have to check on dinner." The meal was delicious, and Alex thanked her repeatedly. Afterward, he felt the urge to collapse into bed and sleep for a week. But she wasn't having it. "Oh no, mister. You're not going to bed without a shower and brushing your teeth, okay?" she teased. "Yes, Mom," Alex joked, and she gave him a playful nudge in the ribs. She was right, though. His hygiene had been terrible lately. When I stepped out of the shower, I found my bed freshly made. It hit me that Anna had been the last one to make it, and the thought saddened me. As I climbed into bed under Rachel's benevolent smile, I couldn't stop thinking about Anna. Was our love real? Could you truly love someone you didn't fully know? She clearly hadn't trusted me enough to tell me everything. Soon after, I drifted into sleep, something I hadn't done peacefully since Anna's end of life. The next morning, I woke up to breakfast waiting on the nightstand. I was surprised I had slept through the night, something that hadn't happened since it all began. How had Rachel managed to keep Mel quiet? She wasn't just determined to help me. She was also quite capable of it. I ate breakfast, feeling a comfort that had escaped me for weeks. A little while later, Rachel entered the room humming happily, holding a sleeping Mel in her arms. She made it all seem so easy. Could a baby really adapt so quickly without her mother? One thing was for sure. I couldn't move on from Anna that easily. I was still grieving, still shocked by her end of life and the double life she had led. It hurt deeply, but I was thankful for Rachel's help, even if I didn't feel any special affection for her. Not yet. "Feeling better?" she asked, sitting beside me. "Physically, yes, thanks to you. Emotionally, I'm still in shock. I don't understand how this all happened." "Are you talking about Anna's end of life?" she asked softly. "About everything. Anna's end of life, the sudden change. I feel like I'm drifting." "If you want me to move out, I will," Rachel said quietly. "I don't want to impose." "No, don't. You're helping me a lot. Please stay." She nodded, and I noticed a tear escape her eye. A few days later, I returned to work, confident Rachel could handle things. She was amazing with Mel, managing everything, including my emotional state, while giving me space when needed. She never tried to kiss me, but she'd hug me when I was down. Exactly what I needed at the time. "Alex, I need to visit my parents this weekend. Can you manage a few days alone?" she asked about 2 months after Anna's end of life. I realized I didn't want her to leave. It wasn't about practical reasons. I needed her presence, which confused me. Rachel smiled when she noticed, exclaiming, "Yes, yes!" She hugged me, and I realized I still loved her. The feeling had been buried under stress, but it was there. Rachel kissed me for the first time in years, and I hadn't realized how much I needed it. Everything felt good again, even if just for the moment. The sex that followed was a little awkward, but we didn't care. Afterward, Rachel promised, "Just don't hurt me again." "Never, Rachel. Never again," I assured her. We had both suffered, but it wasn't in vain. We had Mel, and I promised to be the best partner I could be. "Good," Rachel said. "You'll handle the weekend alone, but don't stay longer. From now on, this is our home, and we'll be a family." Life started to fall into place. Mel called Rachel Mommy, and we decided not to tell her the truth until she was older, if ever. We were happy as we were. One day, Rachel came to me and said, "Alex, I love Mel like my own, but I want to carry your baby. I was so jealous of Annie." "Then let's do it," I said without hesitation. Rachel became emotional, clearly surprised by my response. I didn't see a problem since we were already a family. Do you trust me enough to have a baby with me? I asked. Yes, she replied, pressing herself against me, sobbing softly. Thank you for asking, Rachel. I'd never trick you, she said, looking into my eyes. I know. So let's start, I replied. I just need to get off the pill, but we can start practicing right now, she smiled mischievously. And that's exactly what we did. Tonight, we finished a special meal. I insisted on cooking and went all out. Candles, a white tablecloth, and 3 courses. Rachel was pleasantly surprised, but I could tell she seemed a little nervous during dinner. I didn't usually do this kind of thing, and she was starting to suspect something. I needed to act quickly if I wanted to keep the surprise intact. I walked around the table and got down on one knee. Her jaw dropped like a stone as I fumbled in my pocket. Rachel? I said softly. Yes? She asked, wide-eyed. Would you? Yes, Alex, yes, of course, I'll marry you, she blurted out before I could finish, her joy overflowing. I went quiet, pulling her into a huge kiss as I fell back under her pregnant body. Thank you, Rachel, I said, still in awe of the moment. Are you kidding me? Thanking me? I should be thanking you. And I'll keep thanking you for the rest of my life, she said, her eyes glowing. And you know, we still have that contract, I teased. Yes, but I don't think I'll need it, she smiled. You won't, I reassured her. Oh, and Rachel, one more thing. It's about Mel, I began cautiously. She needs a mother. But she already has one, Rachel said, her tone softening. Yes, but not legally, I pointed out. Rachel looked at me, and to my surprise, tears filled her eyes. God, you'll be lucky today, she said through her sobs, and for the rest of your life. And I was. Now, back in the present, I'm lounging by the pool in the backyard, and my beautiful wife keeps casting longing glances my way while I play with our son. The wedding was small, just in time for my overjoyed father to witness it before he lost his battle with cancer. Before the wedding, I had waited for any sign of Rachel's old madness returning, but she knew exactly what I was thinking and just smiled. It's not happening, Alex. Not this time. I've learned my role, she said with quiet confidence. She was right. I just hope marriage turns out to be less complicated for others. I always knew the process would be tricky, but Rachel's and my version seemed a bit over the top. Dear readers, if you've actually made it through this story, it ends right here. What follows is an alternate ending for those who prefer quick resolutions. It makes no sense and doesn't relate to the story. I just assume these readers prefer simpler narratives. It's over, Rachel. I truly loved you, but you've completely destroyed all my feelings for you. No! She howled. Alex, I can fix this! Please give me another chance! I know how stupid I was, and it won't happen again! I've learned my lesson, and I love only you! It's too little. Too late, Rachel. And by the way, your lover Danny tried to confront me. Apparently, he had no idea about my Navy SEAL background. He's not a bad guy, Alex. Did you hurt him badly? Not too much, I guess. But he won't be doing much for a while. He didn't realize it was a covert intelligence op. I'm so sorry about how things turned out, Alex. And don't worry about the $15 million. It's safe in my Cayman offshore account. I know it looked bad when I tried to pill you for the cartel and they attempted to steal your Mustang, but it was never about the money. All I ever wanted was you. But you can't have him anymore, a woman's voice said from behind. Rachel spun around, shocked. And who are you? Rachel demanded. I'm Sasha, Alex's new fiancé, the woman replied, her voice cool and confident. She was a few years younger than Rachel and looked like a supermodel. And since I run an international private investigation firm, we already have all the evidence we need. If you're not careful, that video of your ménage à trois will end up on the internet. You're finished, Rachel. Alex and I are meant to be together. No, Rachel howled, her voice rising to the intensity of a jet engine. Yes, Sasha continued, unfazed. You had an honest man and you threw him away. Now he's mine and I'm pregnant with his twins. Have a nice life, Rachel. I did love you, but we're done forever. At that moment, Rachel stood frozen, realizing how foolish she had been to treat Alex that way. I've always seen my wife as my closest confidant, someone dependable and trustworthy. So it was a shock when she took a wrong turn and faced the consequences. Tonight, I hoped for a bonus, but I had doubts. It was the first time in 3 years I wore my dark blue tuxedo, looking sharp yet feeling out of place. Instead of relaxing in my favorite chair with a drink, I found myself at a fundraiser with colleagues and spouses, a big social event in our small Midwest town. I'd asked my wife to dress up, and she certainly did, maybe too much. She looked stunning but overly tempting. At 35, she was at her peak beauty, turning heads as she descended the stairs in a revealing maroon dress. Despite her allure, she was mine, and I made that clear. While I'd rather be home, my wife seemed comfortable mingling with the city's elite. She had a natural charm, drawing people to her effortlessly. As I returned from the bar, I found her engrossed in conversation with Senator Thomas Norberto, a charming figure often compared to Tom Selleck. His presence seemed to captivate her like never before, leaving me feeling like a bystander to her infatuation. Noticing they ignored me, I stepped in, politely reminding the senator of my seat. He continued chatting with my delighted wife, so I intervened more assertively, placing drinks between them until he got the message. When he finally acknowledged my presence, he announced he'd leave to find his seat, dismissing me. Fuming, I returned to my place, calling him foolish. My wife defended him, claiming I was rude to a senator. I reminded her of our relationship boundaries, but she rolled her eyes, a move I always disliked. Avoiding a scene, I dropped the matter. Dinner passed, and the band resumed playing. I invited my wife to dance, but she refused, leaving me disappointed. While I chatted with others, I kept an eye on the senator, who eventually left for a veranda. Concerned, I found him there, arm around my wife, engaged in a serious conversation. I intervened, but someone stopped me, warning not to mess with the senator, forcing me out. "I'm warning you, that's my wife he's touching," I gritted out as I was pushed back into the ballroom. Demanding he retrieve her, I threatened a scene. He cursed quietly, turning back to the senator. Hess returned, appearing flustered, claiming ignorance. I grabbed her hand, leading her out. The ride home started in silence, but I knew it wouldn't last. She unleashed, accusing me of humiliating her. I defended my boundaries, reminding her of our marriage. "You're being possessive, crossing a line. You acted like a love-struck teen," she retorted, blushing. She remained silent, conceding my point. Our tension affected the kids, dinner becoming awkward. On Wednesday, she insisted on a serious talk, never a good sign. It ended poorly. She revealed plans to attend another fundraiser with the senator, calling it a non-date. I objected, questioning the appropriateness. She denied any wrongdoing, claiming innocence. I challenged her definition of a date, citing a double standard with her friend Angie. Her reaction confirmed my suspicions. She had issues with Angie, known for her charm. "It's completely different, you know that," she argued, claiming a date with a U.S. senator wasn't the same as a regular date. "There's a big distinction, right?" "Hess, you can't go out with another guy. We're married, remember?" I reminded her, emphasizing our vows. "You don't own me, Reggie, even though we're married," she retorted. "I can do what I want." "I'm not saying you're my property, but you're the mother of our kids. I don't want to break up our family," I pleaded, hoping to reach her. "You're being ridiculous," she dismissed, refusing to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. I was shocked when Hester appeared in a stunning white gown for her date. Our kids were amazed, asking why she was dressed up. She struggled to explain, but I intervened, bluntly stating the truth. As the doorbell rang, I confronted her with a choice, him or us. She opened the door to a security guard, revealing a black limo outside. "Remember to behave for Daddy," she said before leaving. I assumed it was her, stunned momentarily before focusing on my kids who needed attention. Drowning sorrows in booze wasn't an option. I planned a few FaceTime calls, one to my parents, one to hers. The kids enjoyed chatting with their grandparents. Starting with Hester's parents, I anticipated her recent actions would upset them. We laughed until Hester's absence was noticed. "Where's my daughter, Reggie? Have you hidden her?" my mother-in-law joked. I softly explained Hester was on a date with Senator Thomas Norberto, expecting her return the next day. Shocked, my in-laws couldn't believe I let her go. I tried reasoning with her, emphasizing family neglect, but she seemed convinced it was acceptable. The kids took over the conversation, a welcome distraction. My mother-in-law urged communication and patience. Later, I called my parents, receiving less sympathetic advice from my mother, who recommended a lawyer. After a few calls, I ordered pizza, watched a Disney movie with the kids, and struggled to sleep, distracted by ESPN. In the morning, I made pancakes and bacon, reassuring the kids their mom would return soon, even if it was uncertain. There was no rush to come home after spending the night with another man. The black limo arrived in our driveway around 1 p.m., catching the attention of our kids and neighbors. Usually they'd rush to greet their mom, but this time they stayed put, disappointed by her lackluster appearance. She still wore the same dress from the night before, now wrinkled and tired-looking. I sat in the living room as she entered, showing no eagerness to greet her. "Hey," she greeted, acknowledging our night apart. "Looks like you and the kids managed without me," I replied sharply. She headed upstairs, asking for rest and a shower. I raised my hands in mock surrender, realizing our relationship was over. Now, I focused on making things easy for my kids, avoiding becoming a weekend-only father. The question lingered. Could I stay until the kids graduated high school? When Hester finally came downstairs at 7 p.m., I'd already made dinner. I mentioned leftovers in the fridge, receiving a faint smile. The kids sensed tension and kept their distance. Alone, Hester accused me of poisoning their minds. I denied it, highlighting the impact of her actions on them and our neighbors. "I didn't break up our family," she defended, shifting blame to me. "It's up to you. If you can work on your ego issues, we can heal and keep our family together. But if you continue being petty and nasty, we'll have to go our separate ways, and you can be Mr. Part-Time Dad," she warned, catching me off guard. I had expected regret, not resistance and anger. "It's 1 in the afternoon, you idiot," I retorted. "You couldn't get enough last night? Needed a half-day fling, huh?" She paused, avoiding my gaze. "We can get past this and go back to how things were. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I needed this for myself, and I don't regret it," she said, unapologetic. "That's a terrible apology if that's what it is," I remarked. "You're only sorry for hurting me, not for anything else." "It was amazing for you," she said defensively. My response matched her conviction. "Your actions betrayed our vows and our family." I recounted how surprised she was when I found her in our guest bedroom. "We can't move forward unless you try," she pleaded. "No, it's too late now," I clarified, locking her out of the room. I slept soundly that night, exhausted from 48 hours of tension. The next morning, I continued our Sunday brunch tradition, making Belgian waffles. "Mom looks rough, like she hasn't slept," Elise observed as we sat down to eat. "Maybe you should go out more on Friday nights," I suggested. Hess burst into tears and fled to the bedroom, leaving the children puzzled. "Did I say something wrong?" Elise innocently asked. "No, sweetheart, Mommy probably just missed the waffles," I reassured softly. Later, as I relaxed in my lazy boy watching the Cubs game, the bedroom door slammed open and a frantic Hester stormed in, ranting incoherently. "Calm down, honey. I can't understand you with all the drooling and spitting," I remarked. She sobbed, accusing me of making her seem promiscuous to her parents. "What's a Kardashian, Mommy?" Elise asked, joining the scene. I exchanged a glance with Hester, who composed herself and sent the kids to their rooms before confronting me. "Tell me," she demanded as soon as the kids were out of earshot. "I saw no reason to hide it from your parents since you were just following a senator to a fundraiser," I explained. "If they agree with me, it's not my fault. And by the way, my mom had a similar reaction, so watch out next time she's near." "No, it's not like that," she began, then stopped abruptly. "An amazing experience," I interjected. "If looks could eliminate, I'd be a stain on the chair. But it doesn't bother me much." I gestured for her to move so I could see the TV before she hurried out of the room. For the following 2 weeks, I slept in the guest room. Noticing this, I told the kids that I had a cold and didn't want their mother to catch it. I assumed Eliza had figured out my deception, but she prudently kept it to herself without saying anything. A 7-year-old child demonstrates impressive intelligence. One night, an hour after Hess had gone upstairs, I returned to our sharing bed and softly climbed into her. When the alarm went off the next morning, she snuggled up next to me. "It feels great," she muttered. "It's time to come to your senses." She attempted to touch me. I stopped her by placing my hand on her forearm and drawing her hand away. I adjusted our position so that we were facing each other on the bed. "Certain acts are best performed when you can make direct eye contact. Before I decide to sleep with you again, you will have to get tested and provide me with the results," I said softly. "You could be willing to trust Senator, but I am not." Tears welled in her eyes. She appeared to be about to say something, but then decided not to. Instead, she simply nodded. It revealed to me that she and the senator were not using protection. The scenario is growing very intriguing. Originally, I planned to stay until the kids finished high school, roughly another 14 years until Nate headed to college. My love for them made me willing to endure. but the prospect of long-term closeness absence, especially with an attractive woman under the same roof, seemed untenable. Despite concerns about my reputation, my feelings for her had dwindled over the past 2 weeks. Seeing her leave the bed with sadness no longer stirred me as it once did. My own pain prevented me from offering comfort. Who was she now? The woman I married would have understood my disapproval of her seeing someone else. Hester and I met in college, started dating 3 months later, and married within 2 years. She worked as an actuary, a job requiring precision and honesty, traits that balanced my spontaneity and humor. Despite our differences, I envisioned celebrating 50 years of marriage. Senator Thomas Norberto unexpectedly became a part of our lives. 10 days after returning to our shared bed, Hester handed me an envelope as I came home from work. Inside was her clear bill of health. "Hope you're satisfied," she coldly whispered. "You have no idea how humiliating this was. I may never face Dr. Sanjay again." "Not my fault, baby," I replied plainly. "Stay faithful, and you won't be embarrassed." She hissed softly but couldn't retort. As she walked away, I pressed on. "How often has Senator contacted you?" She began, but I silenced her with a gesture. With a grimace, she handed over her phone. I found texts and calls from him, but no evidence of further meetings. "Damn it," I exclaimed. "We're on thin ice." "Agreed," she returned seriously, pocketing her phone and heading to the kitchen. That night, she showed me affection in bed, and instinct took over. I didn't have feelings for her, I just fulfilled my needs. I knew she tried to win me back, but I was preoccupied. Hester's abrupt return home sparked neighborhood gossip. Sympathetic looks from men and smirks from women hinted at rumors. One evening, Eliza approached me asking about a women's club. I kept my composure, explaining Mommy's mistake and reassuring her. I hugged her, concealing my emotions, knowing this moment would haunt me forever. A feeling of normality gradually returned to our household, at least as far as I could see. Yet, it was a different kind of normalcy. Whether Hessa admitted it or not, things would never revert to how they were before that day. I couldn't fully trust her again, nor could I forgive or forget the profound disrespect she had shown me and our family. Love. To borrow from Tina Turner, what does love have to do with any of this? 6 months later, he seemed to grasp something or find the courage to speak up. Following that evening, which she instigated, I turned away from her to sleep, as had become customary since then. Before she said anything, I could hear her crying. "Reggie? Reggie, can we talk?" "What's up?" she asked meekly. "Sure," I sighed. "Could you please turn around?" Her tone conveyed clear irritation as she inquired. I sighed again, trying to mask her frustration. Then I turned to meet her gaze. She kept glancing at my eyes. "Do you realize how long it's been since we were close? Say it." "I did say it," I insisted. "You had the courage to do it, have the bravery to admit it. We haven't been close since I went on a date." "I noticed," she said. "You satisfy me physically, then sleep. You ensure I'm happy, but it feels purely physical. And you haven't hugged me since. I miss that. Closeness? You can't even say those words." "Baby," I replied. "Your date? You cheated on me with him. Admit it, I'm not stupid. You go on a date and don't come back until the next day. You make it seem cheap and disgusting," she protested. "Yes, we were lovemaking on Saturday night, and it was great. He was gentle and caring, just like you. Really, it was an unforgettable experience. That's why we're not making love anymore. Yes, don't you see? You gave him something that, as you promised, was exclusively mine. And you enjoyed everything. It was unforgettable, as you said. Come on, Reg. It was only one night. 2 days. From a statistical standpoint, this is little compared to the hundreds of days we'll spend married. We can forget it, Reg, if you're willing to try," she pleaded. "Thanks for the math lesson, but I've never seen our marriage as a math problem. Would you feel the same if I did it with Mary Jo Young? Mary Jo Young, a divorced blonde with a nice figure, lives close by. Almost every woman on our street watches her closely with her husband." "Wait, are you suggesting you want Mary Jo? No way," she exclaimed. "Listen to your inner voice." "I never said I wanted Mary Jo. That was you. I was just wondering how you'd react if I did," I clarified. She looked puzzled until it clicked. Then her expression turned angry. "I can read between the lines. No need for words," I replied smugly. She avoided eye contact. "Do you realize, because of what happened, the other girls in the neighborhood bullied Eliza? They overheard their mothers calling you names. It wasn't pleasant," I informed her. Her anger shifted to disbelief at the news. "Eliza never mentioned it." She took a breath, processing. "I'm truly sorry. sorry isn't enough. You call the night unforgettable. It was unforgettable, but for betrayal, I declared. With that, I turned away and went to bed, unaware of her next move. Credit is due to Hester. Over the next few months, she committed herself to being an exceptional mother. Traditionally, I had been the primary caregiver for our children. But suddenly, Hester took on her share of responsibilities, driving the kids to their various activities and offering them warm support. It made me wonder if she had finally realized that prioritizing our family over her own desires was essential to keeping us together. What a revelation. The children seemed to appreciate the extra attention, but once again, my daughter demonstrated her remarkable perceptiveness beyond her 8 years. "Mom is really trying, Daddy," she said to me one day. "I hope she gets a proper apology for whatever she did wrong." I tried to respond with a genuine smile, acknowledging her keen awareness of the world around her. Everything appeared normal in the Wilkerson household. I worked diligently to maintain appearances. As for Hester, she seemed eager to make tremendous efforts, not only to uphold appearances, but also to regain my favor. We were two individuals sharing a roof and enjoying certain benefits. Despite her strong desire for normalcy, she expected me to give in eventually. Somewhere within me, remnants of my affection for her remained. However, I couldn't erase 9 years of having her as the focal point of my life. She made things harder for herself by maintaining communication with Senator Prick. I checked her phone calls and messages shortly after her date. She made sure they were clear. Yet she didn't realize how easy it was to clone a phone and access all communications. He seemed to keep in touch regularly, while she tried to keep him at arm's length, at least for now. "Can we schedule another date soon?" "I'll be in town," he texted nearly a month ago. "My hubby is still upset from last time," she replied. "I can't risk it." Needless to say, I wasn't impressed. A month later, we marked our 10th anniversary with a family trip to Chuck E. Cheese. The kids had a blast, but Hester didn't. She waited until the kids were playing games before expressing her disappointment with me. "We've always marked our anniversaries, just the two of us, with a special night. You're altering tradition because you're still holding a grudge? When did you become so petty and small?" she remarked once more. The answer to that question is similar to many others about your date. "You did this to me, to us, and to yourself," I replied. "Can't you move past this?" she pleaded. "How often do you two communicate?" I asked directly. She dared to smirk before reaching into her pocket, retrieving her phone and handing it to me. I tossed it high into the air and caught it easily when it fell. "I understand you've been disloyal, but I also acknowledge your intelligence. I bet there's no evidence of your affair on that phone, not since I confiscated it the first time. However, there are records of past texts and calls that you may not have initiated, but I've never heard you explicitly reject the person. Why is that?" Her cheeks flushed as she looked away. "Yes, I knew that was a rhetorical question," I muttered. Amidst this turmoil, my career and my children provided stability. Though my colleagues often remarked that I looked like I needed a good night's sleep or even 6, I was convinced I was developing an ulcer. My hard drinks consumption had increased, and sleep was elusive. There were nights when I lay awake for hours, staring at my wife, wondering what went wrong. She insisted on loving me, justifying her actions as separate from our relationship. She felt entitled to her night out with Senator Prick and showed no guilt for her behavior, only regret for the injury she caused me. I waited for the other shoe to drop. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law became a source of strength during this challenging time. She repeatedly expressed regret for her daughter's actions. "We apologize, Reggie. We didn't raise her to be this selfish, but I really hope you can find a way to move past this." During one of her calls to check on me, she said, "I know what you're doing for the children." As I headed to the kitchen, I grabbed another cooler of beer to take outside. We were having our usual monthly summer picnic in the neighborhood. Outside, we had 2 grills going, offering a variety of hot and cold dishes, fruits, desserts, and drinks. The weather was perfect, sunny, and 80 degrees Fahrenheit with hardly a breeze. The gathering had started a few hours ago and was expected to continue for another 5 or 6. These gatherings were always enjoyable for both kids and adults alike. As I moved through the house, I heard female voices from our home office, typically off limits to non-family. I intended to redirect them to the family room or living area. While most activity happened outside, sometimes someone sought refuge indoors for AC or quiet talks. However, this particular space posed a problem. Yeah, when Reggie takes charge, I can't help but think of him. He's assertive, driven, and focused on his goals. Sometimes I can't shake the memory of that night. It's something I'll cherish forever, Hester declared to her companion as I approached the room. I halted in my tracks, my legs weakening, almost stumbling. Damn, how many people know I'm being betrayed? I heard laughter. Apparently there were 3 of them inside. I missed the rest of the conversation as I fought the urge to vomit. I was relieved to reach the restroom before getting sick, emptying everything from the night before, breakfast, and lunch. After tidying up, I brought the cooler of beer outside and gave 2 bottles to the guys manning the grills. Hey, Reg, you all right? You seem a bit off, said John Lasky, casually concerned. John, I'm good, I replied before drifting away. I stayed quiet for the rest of the gathering. When Hester and her friends returned, I felt eyes on me and noticed smirks aimed my way. Maybe I was losing it, but it seemed like almost every woman at the BBQ was sneering at me. Later that night, after putting the kids to bed and finishing the cleanup, I confronted my wife about my discomfort. She sat on a lounge chair, sipping a wine cooler, looking content. I joined her. Did anyone show up today who doesn't know about your affair? I asked sincerely. She looked taken aback. I returned her gaze, pretending innocence. I might have mentioned it to a couple girlfriends recently. It was quite the experience, she chuckled. He's a charming senator, I couldn't help but share. So first you cheat, then you embarrass me in front of your friends, making every husband aware of your infidelity and branding me as a betrayed, I accused. I'm not unfaithful, and I won't tolerate being labeled as such, she yelled back. It was just one mistake. I didn't sleep with a stranger in some seedy motel. Her eyes flashed with intensity as she rose from her chaise lounge. I've had enough of this, she declared, her voice growing louder. You've been playing games for over a year now. Your wife had an affair with another man, a handsome and muscular man. It's time to move forward. I won't be held hostage by your insecurities any longer. If you can't let go, that's your problem. Either file for divorce or face reality. I'm tired of living a lie with you, pretending to be the perfect couple. Decide now. Her outburst caught me off guard, and I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours. She had already walked away, leaving me alone, even though I had just regained consciousness. I'm naturally reserved and slow to react, which some, including my wife, interpret as weakness. I seldom panic or act hastily. It pains me to think about not seeing my children every day, but I'm hopeful to salvage my family. I had braced myself for the worst, with a lawyer on standby to fight for me, so I took action. First thing Monday morning, Hester was served with divorce papers at her workplace before the day was out. As expected, she was not pleased. About 5 minutes after being served, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Ignoring all her calls, I anticipated the brewing storm upon my return home. Stepping into the house from the garage, Hester exploded in anger. You fool, she shouted. Your fragile male ego is bruised and you humiliate me in front of my colleagues. Just as you embarrassed us in front of our friends and neighbors the other day, I retorted. You practically begged me to file. So I did. She shot me a scornful look but remained silent. Putting down my belongings, I approached my children for a brief chat, reassuring them of my unwavering love despite us no longer sharing a home starting tomorrow. Elise grasped the situation, having friends with divorced parents, but Nate seemed puzzled. I knew he would struggle, but I was confident my daughter would lend support. Living in a no-fault state made the divorce process seem straightforward. She was expected to receive primary custody of the children, the house, child support, and some alimony. But no, she vehemently contested. For some inexplicable reason known only to her, her lawyer employed various tactics to prolong the proceedings, including insisting on meetings and even suggesting marital counseling. What's the deal? Have your actions spoken louder than your words? You say you love me, yet you've caused so much turmoil. And then you have the nerve to tell your friends he's the best you've ever had. Why would I want to remain in this marriage if all I get is aggravation? I love my kids, but if I stay with you, they'll only remember an embittered man, I expressed in one session. But I love you, Reg. Are you fixated on one incident? Yes, he was exceptional, but it was a one-time mistake. Please forgive me, she pleaded. I can't, Hess, I replied. You broke our vows and belittled their importance. I can't overlook that. You made promises to me. I hadn't planned to do this. Truly, I hadn't, but everyone has a breaking point. The beauty of a two-party political system lies in its contrast. Regardless of how you spin it, Senator Prick belonged to one side, meaning the opposing party would welcome anything that tarnished his reputation over a year ago. After Hester's affair, I devised a backup plan. I sought the help of a well-connected lawyer in our city to approach the chairman of the opposing political party, who was eager for anything that could damage the senator's chances of re-election and White House aspirations. Despite promising a hefty monetary reward, they eagerly awaited the information. He had to agree that the evidence would only be revealed if the possessor requested it. Every month, my lawyer kept me informed about the chairman's persistent requests. This month, we were ready to fulfill the chairman's demands. The meeting, my first involvement, was set in my lawyer's office. After introductions, I took out a sealed plastic bag from my briefcase and placed it on the conference table. The chairman's surprise was evident upon seeing the bag's contents. "Dear God," he muttered. "Is that what I think it is?" "If you suspect it's evidence that could end Senator Prick's career," I replied, "then yes." They regarded the bag as if it held precious gold bars. He refrained from touching it, instead continuing to stare in amazement. "That arrogant woman returned home and went upstairs for a shower," I recounted. "Since she handles the laundry, she probably assumed I wouldn't go through the basket." I waited until I heard the water running before entering the bathroom and finding the underwear at the bottom of the hamper. Everyone these days is familiar with DNA from television. I'm confident that when you test these, you'll find two distinct sets. Also, here's her toothbrush for DNA comparisons. I assume you'll obtain the senator's sample for matching, unless you already have it, I said, giving the chairman a stern look. He reddened and glanced away, just as I anticipated. I knew he grasped all the complexities of the case, so there was no need to reiterate them. However, I sensed his unspoken question in his expression. Why? Because she lacks the intelligence to realize she shouldn't cross me. She betrayed me, yet she arrogantly assumes I'll eventually forgive her. Now she's flaunting it in front of me. To hell with her and the senators she associates with, I declared. Your career is finished, Thomas. Damn you, Norberto, you foolish woman. How on earth could your weak husband obtain evidence of our weekend together? I suspected he was aware, but there was evidence. How Norberto raged at Hester on the phone a week after my meeting with the chairman, I do not know. I have no clue what you're talking about, she faltered. The phone call caught me off guard. I used to clone hers. I essentially admitted to her that I had tapped her phone some months ago and that they hadn't been communicating through that means, if at all. What did you do wrong? She asked when I returned her call 90 minutes later. I understood what she meant, but I was feeling vengeful, or so I thought. I just ordered a pepperoni pizza with garlic bread. Why do you care what I eat? Wait, how do you know what I eat? She snapped at me. From past encounters, I could tell she despised my foolish actions. While she may have seemed to view me as feeble, she knew better. Well, I guess being right about one thing out of two wasn't too bad. I'm not sure how you managed it, but it seems you got back at Senator Norberto in some way. He threatened to rough me up for something you did, though he wouldn't say what. Thanks, by the way, my parents are livid. Yours are too. Elise has been avoiding me, and you can't seem to grasp that what Thomas and I did was unrelated to our relationship. Yes, about that, I started. Senator Norberto, who was seemingly assured of retaining his seat, suddenly dropped out of the Senate race 8 months before the election, citing significant mental fatigue. With everything else going on in my life, seeking female companionship was the least of my concerns. I hadn't looked at a woman in an appealing way for months until my daughter brought it up. Daddy, when do you plan to start seeing other women? Elise asked casually. My children joined me for the second weekend. Linda's mom really wants to go out with you, I was stunned. My jaw must have dropped. Lost in the chaos of divorce, I hadn't thought much about my future beyond taking care of my kids. Every other weekend and a few weeks during the summer, Linda's mom brought it up. And you're okay with that? I asked, surprised. Well, she didn't directly tell me, Dad. Elise revealed she overheard her talking with Annie's mom, but yeah, I'd be fine with it. Dad, I don't want you to be alone, but please, not Marcy's mom. None of us kids liked her. Kids pick up on things, Dad. Linda's mom had been divorced from her for about 5 years. I had a terrible husband. She was a charming, lively blonde with curves who still carried the spirited vibe of her old cheerleading days. I had never considered she might be interested in me. When you're married, you don't think about other women's possibilities. At least I didn't. Was I naive? Elise was quietly keeping an eye on me. It's okay, Dad. I'm almost 9. I understand about divorce and all. Nate and I will be fine. Just take care of yourself. It seemed like I was back in the dating scene. Linda's mom, Julie, became my first date after re-entering the dating pool, and it felt nice, though somewhat obligatory. I explained to her that emotionally, I wasn't ready for anything serious yet, considering my recent return to dating. She responded with a comforting smile, telling me I didn't owe an explanation to every person I dated. Julie offered valuable advice, almost like a crash course on navigating life with divorced parents. She also mentioned that I would catch the eye of other divorced moms among my children's friends, given my reputation as a good father with a successful career and, well, not unattractive. She blushed a bit when she mentioned the last part. I went on to date Julie and a few other divorced mothers. Sometimes I hardly thought about my ex-wife, Hester, or our past marriage. While I admitted to feeling lonely at times, it wasn't enough to consider reconciling with her. I refused to entertain the idea of her betraying me again. Hester, however, quickly dismissed her affair as a foolish mistake, promising never to repeat it. A foolish mistake? I scoffed. It was poor judgment, a lack of respect, and ultimately selfishness. You prioritized an affair with the senator over your family's well-being? Her mouth opened and closed twice. I sensed her desire to respond, but she remained speechless. I half expected her to persist, despite the fact that she couldn't justify her actions, especially now that contacting the senator seemed pointless. One Saturday during dinner while the kids and I were visiting, my ex-mother-in-law informed me that he had asked her never to contact him again. He seemed to think you played a role in his decision to withdraw from the Senate election, and that she didn't intervene enough, she recounted. I raised an eyebrow and continued eating quietly, opting not to comment. A few months later, some guys from work suggested going to a new upscale bar with a dance floor. When I was married, I avoided Thursday evening outings like the plague, but now that I'm single, I find myself going out regularly. 4 of us found a table, ordered drinks, and soaked in the atmosphere of the place. I noticed the 2 women as soon as they walked in. The first woman looked to be in her early 40s, but dressed more in line with individuals over 30, aiming to evoke a youthful vibe. She wore a silk blue shirt, slightly unbuttoned, and a short skirt accentuating her long, toned legs. With short, dark brown hair and green eyes, she seemed brimming with confidence. On the other hand, her friend seemed out of place in the pub setting. Slightly older than her companion, possibly in her early 40s, she exuded refinement and wealth. Clad in a sweater and skirt from a high-end store, she radiated elegance and beauty with her shoulder-length silver blonde hair and dark eyes. Seating themselves at a nearby table, the women quickly caught the attention of males eager to engage or dance with them. I couldn't shake the desire to dance with one of them. Particularly the dark-haired woman seemed ready for some fun, if not more. She readily accepted dances from every man who approached her. In contrast, the blonde woman danced sparingly and seemed more reserved in her movements. An hour later, I resolved to invite the blonde woman to dance. However, as I approached her table, the brunette grabbed my hand and whisked me onto the dance floor. I became completely captivated by her and forgot about her companion. We danced to upbeat songs until the tempo slowed. When she passionately kissed me, I was entranced. We left the club together and went to my place. Our passion carried over into the bedroom, and that night she shared details of her life. It turned out she and her friend were celebrating her recent divorce. Rosie proved to be an amazing lover, and we dated for about a month before she expressed hesitancy to commit so soon after her divorce. I respected her perspective, and we parted amicably. However, since our initial encounter, I've never had the chance to inquire about her friend, which sparked my curiosity. A few weeks later, I found myself alone in the bar of another upscale establishment, seeking solace with a drink. It wasn't my turn to care for the children after a long week, so I had the weekend to myself. She entered the room solo, capturing everyone's attention. Her figure resembled Megan from Stallion, with a cascade of rich brown locks framing her face and draping over her shoulders. Striding over in 4-inch stilettos, she settled next to me. Instantly, I felt like I'd stepped into heaven. I scrambled for a clever opening line, but before I could speak, she gazed into my eyes and asked for my drink order. I replied with a sly grin, feeling a twinge of envy at her poise, and my thoughts scattered. "Excellent choice," she purred. "A man with impeccable taste." Ordering the same undiluted drink as mine, she spent the evening sharing about the boutique marketing company she founded years ago. Remarkable. Not only was she captivating and intelligent, but she also ran a thriving business. Later, we departed for her charming apartment. She mentioned her preference for lovemaking in her own bed, a common sentiment among women, and delved into the psychology behind it. With her impeccably toned physique, I couldn't believe she was 45. Our first encounter was unforgettable. She was an exceptional kisser, and I felt a connection with her unlike any since my date with Hester. In just one night, Maria Washington opened up to me more honestly than Hester ever had. During our 9-year marriage, Maria confessed her dedication to her career and lack of desire for children, preferring casual relationships with various men. Despite developing genuine feelings for her, knowing a traditional relationship wasn't an option, I agreed to be friends with benefits for the next year. We met monthly until Marielle unexpectedly fell in love with a much younger man. "You're one lucky guy," my ex-mother-in-law would occasionally call me. Despite the divorce, we remained close, bound by mutual understanding and our grandchildren. I still referred to them as Mom and Dad. "Could I ask you a favor, Reg?" she inquired cautiously. "Of course, as long as it doesn't involve your daughter," I replied. It was a matter of courtesy to take my mother-in-law's request to bring her personal assistant to their upcoming company Christmas party seriously. She's a good-hearted person, Reg. She went through a divorce a few years ago from an abusive cheater, and I don't think she's dated anyone since. She was hurt, Reg, and she needs a decent guy to show her that not all men are scoundrels. And I think you're a decent guy, my ex-mother-in-law explained. Isn't it odd when your former mother-in-law tries to set you up on a date? Just one thing, Mom, I interjected. Please tell me she's not boring. Mom caught on to the humor and chuckled. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, Reggie. You might even let us keep the kids for a night or two, she teased. Mom was spot on. I was pleasantly surprised. Cheryl, or Sherilyn as she preferred, was a delightful bundle of charm with a well-proportioned figure. She was warm without being overly effusive, and she had a delightful habit of wrinkling her nose and squinting her green eyes when she was amused. Equally important, she had a genuinely great personality. I made a point of sticking close to Sherilyn throughout the evening, giving her my full attention, much like I would have with my ex-wife. Sherilyn seemed appreciative of the gesture. While she engaged in conversation, she tended to defer to others, which I suppose was understandable given her upbringing. We sat with my in-laws at a table. Mom was as graceful as ever, while Dad was more reserved. At first I understood his demeanor, but he grew more open as the evening progressed. I surprised Jerry with my dancing skills, which I had honed to please my ex-wife, Hester, who loved to dance. Sherilyn also demonstrated proficiency, especially in faster dances. And she complimented me perfectly in slow dances, as if we had been dancing together for years. I savored the feeling of her body against mine as I escorted Sherilyn to the door. She gave me a gentle kiss on the lips and handed me her phone number. I realized I owed my in-laws more time with their grandchildren. After 3 days, I called Sherilyn to ask her out. She agreed to a date the following Friday at one of the city's finest Italian restaurants, followed by an art exhibit at a nearby gallery. Sherilyn dressed more provocatively for our date than she did at the Christmas party, which impressed me even more. We had a wonderful time, and we went out 3 more times before I felt it was time for her to meet my 8-year-old daughter and for me to meet hers. We spent quality time together, playing mini-golf and enjoying a picnic in a nearby park. Overall, I felt it went smoothly, particularly because the 2 girls developed a strong bond. However, as expected for his age, my kid wasn't thrilled because he believed all girls had cooties. Sherry and I met several times a week, and when I had my children, we engaged in family activities together, including all 5 of us. Everything was going well until a few weeks into the new school year, when I received an unexpected phone call from Hester. I'm not sure what your girlfriend has been teaching my kids, but your son was in the principal's office today for fighting, and his face is all beaten up. He's been suspended for 3 days, and all he can say is that it all started with this Monique girl he keeps calling his sister, she raged over the phone. First and foremost, you have no right to call my girlfriend names like that. I'll come over after dinner and take Nate out for ice cream. Let's not jump to conclusions until we know exactly what happened, I responded calmly. I heard her sigh before she hung up. After dinner, I picked up Nate and took him to a small, family-owned ice cream parlor. As soon as he got into my car, I conducted a thorough visual inspection. He had a cut on his lip and a scratch on the left side of his face. He joked, "You should see the other guy, Dad." "What's the truth, Nathan Abraham?" I responded with his full name to emphasize seriousness. He winced at the mention of his first and middle names. "A kid was bullying Mo, Dad. I told him to leave my sister alone. He threw the first punch. Then I punched him hard. They say I broke his nose. It made a loud crack, and there was blood everywhere," he explained, trying to hide a grin. "The boy who bothered Mo was 2 years older than Nate. Will Mo tell me the same story?" I asked. "Absolutely, Dad. I wouldn't have punched him if he hadn't thrown the first punch. I was just defending Mo. You always tell me to look out for Allie, so I figured it applied to Mo too. She's really small, Dad, Nate said. Nate had a valid point. Monique inherited her mother's petite stature, making her at least half a head shorter than most of her peers. I had always stressed to Nate the importance of looking out for his sister, and it seemed he now saw Monique as part of his family. It was fascinating how the innocence of childhood sometimes outweighed the wisdom of experience. I commend you for protecting Mo, but let's keep it between us, I told him. I'll speak with the principal and see what can be done. You might want to update your mother on Mo's status. It seems you and Elise haven't been keeping her fully informed about my life, which I appreciate. However, it might be better coming from you and Elise, I said. I mentioned that my 7-year-old understood completely. Children mature quite quickly these days. And Dad, when are you and Sherry tying the knot? She's amazing, you know, he added. As I mentioned earlier, kids grow up fast, and he was right. It was time to make a commitment to that woman. The following day, I reached out to the principal. The school had a strict zero-tolerance policy for fighting, regardless of whether it was self-defense. However, they also had a zero-tolerance policy for bullying. As a result, the aggressor received a 6-day suspension following interviews with witnesses. Although I disagreed with the policy, I advised him not to contest his punishment manually. Furthermore, I assured him of my support and promised to propose to Sherry as soon as I could afford the ring. Things got complicated when Hester discovered Sherry was Mom's personal assistant and that Mom had scheduled their first meeting. "What on earth, Mom? Aren't you supposed to be on my side?" Hester yelled later. "According to Mom, there's no your side," Mom replied. "He's not coming back to you. You completely messed that up. So why let a good man go to waste? Carolyn is a wonderful woman and a great friend. She deserves someone like Reggie." Mom described Hester's scream as horrifying as she recounted the incident. While both my children enjoyed Sherry's company, my daughter in particular seemed to admire her nurturing demeanor towards me. Sherry had a natural inclination to fulfill my desires, making me feel like the master of my domain. This, in turn, encouraged me to treat her like my queen. Elise seemed to enjoy witnessing the affectionate banter between Sherry and me. "I'm not sure if you two are endearing or nauseating," Elise remarked one day, "but I enjoy being around to witness it." A couple of months later, our lovemaking wedding only included our 3 children, my parents, and my ex-in-laws as guests. The court clerk who officiated the ceremony was surprised when my ex-mother-in-law stood as Sherry's maid of honor. "It's quite a story," I chuckled when she inquired. "Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition to come from the classic British comedy ensemble Monty Python's Flying Circus. But truth be told, nobody expects an inquiry from a federal marshal either." I was taken completely by surprise when 2 officials entered my office on a Monday morning. It seemed the authorities were upset about a certain former senator's altercation and subsequent injury in the restroom of an upscale restaurant in Houston, Texas. My name, along with that of several other aggrieved husbands, emerged as potential suspects. "I can't say I'm sorry to hear about the senator's troubles. Nobody, and I truly mean that, deserves it more," I remarked to the disgruntled marshals. "You do realize that the fool slept with my then-wife almost 4 years ago. If I had any intentions, wouldn't I have acted long before now?" I retorted with heavy sarcasm. However, the grilling from the federal agents was just the beginning. A week later, a reporter from the Associated Press showed up at my office seeking details about the aforementioned incident. It appeared he had somehow obtained a confidential roster of 26 women the senator allegedly had affairs with during his time in office. At this point, several individuals were aware of Hester's rendezvous with the senator. Though I certainly didn't publicize it over the years, Hester likely disclosed it to more people than I did. As she took pride in her achievement, however, I couldn't help but wonder about her level of pride when news of the senator's misconduct emerged, implicating her as one of his lovers. "Why did you disclose that to him?" she practically yelled at me over the phone. "I didn't. He informed me that your name was on the senator's roster. All I did was confirm the accuracy of your inclusion on the list. I wasn't going to fabricate to spare you from embarrassment." "Promiscuous. I am not promiscuous," she screamed at me before I ended the call. I must confess I chuckled. I also entertained the thought of taking an extended vacation out of town when the news article broke. She messed up, literally. And yet I was going to suffer an embarrassing fallout as well. Cherry talked me out of that notion. "Don't engage in any confrontation. Stick to the truth. She cheated on you, divorced her. Move on," Cherry advised. Unfortunately, my children were going to endure verbal bullying for the remainder of their school years. we would be addressing the fact that their mother was a self-centered cheater for years to come. I also sympathized greatly with my ex-in-laws, who had become close friends of ours. After the article came out, we invited them to stay with us in the house we had purchased for a couple of weeks. During that time, they mostly stayed indoors and avoided answering their phones. I adore my daughter. You grasp the parental emotions, but I'm deeply ashamed that she thought it acceptable to engage in promiscuous behavior, Dad confessed. No father wants his daughter to be perceived in that manner. As time elapsed, the scandal dissipated, and life resumed its usual course. Gradually, my children began spending more time with Cherry, Mo, and me at our house. It wasn't formal, but our home naturally evolved into the neighborhood kids' gathering spot. Initially, Hester objected, but I believe things smoothed over. Furthermore, I ensured Elise and Nate maintained open communication with Hester to prevent her from accusing me of alienating her children again. Mom and Dad's frequent visits helped alleviate tensions. When the kids were with me, we seldom discussed Hester. Although she remained their mother, she became an ex in my life. They also refrained from mentioning her out of respect for Sherry, whom they now referred to as Mom. Initially, I sensed discomfort from Hester's parents when the kids started calling Cherry Mom, but that soon faded as they had been close to Cherry even before our marriage. Amidst the upheaval in my life and my family's, I paid scant attention to Hester's affairs. I knew she occasionally dated based on the kids' remarks, but I was startled when Elise announced one afternoon that her mother was engaged. A wave of sadness engulfed me for what might have been. Then, I felt a comforting embrace envelop me, and my sorrow swiftly transformed into joy for what I now possessed.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate you joining us, and we can't wait to dive into another cheating wife story. So, without further ado, let's begin. Marcus Steele's pager went off like a firecracker, shattering the relative calm of the hospital corridor. He glanced at the tiny screen, his eyes widening as he read the message. Trauma incoming. All hands on deck. Without hesitation, he sprinted down the hallway, his white coat billowing behind him like a cape. The pristine floors squeaked under his polished shoes as he burst through the double doors into the operating room. "What VE we got?" he barked, extending his arms as a nurse helped him into a surgical gown. 8-year-old female. Multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding. "Car crash," the head nurse, Sarah, replied crisply. Her eyes, visible above her surgical mask, were steady and focused. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing through possible scenarios and procedures. As he pulled on his latex gloves with practiced ease, a fleeting thought of Vanessa crossed his mind. She'd been distant lately, canceling their dinner plans more often than not. He pushed the thought aside. There would be time for that later. "Blood pressure?" he asked, moving to the operating table where the young girl lay, her small body dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding her. "Dropping fast," another nurse responded. 85/60 and falling. Marcus's jaw set in determination. "We need to stop this internal bleeding now." Scalpel. The next few hours were a blur of focused intensity. Marcus worked tirelessly, his hands steady and sure as he navigated the complex landscape of the girl's injured body. The beeping of monitors and the hiss of equipment provided a constant backdrop to the life-and-death struggle playing out on the operating table. "More suction here," Marcus ordered, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. "We've got a bleeder." The team moved like a well-oiled machine, anticipating Marcus's needs before he even voiced them. Time seemed to stretch and compress, minutes feeling like hours and hours like minutes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus stepped back from the table. He pulled off his surgical mask, revealing a face etched with exhaustion but glowing with triumph. "We've stabilized her," he announced, his voice hoarse but filled with satisfaction. "Good work, everyone. She's going to make it." A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room. Sarah, the head nurse, patted Marcus on the back. "Another life saved, Dr. Steele. You're a miracle worker." Marcus shook his head modestly. "It was a team effort. We all saved her." As he left the operating room, stripping off his surgical gown and gloves, Marcus's thoughts turned to home. He was looking forward to sharing the news of his successful surgery with Vanessa. Maybe it would bridge the growing gap between them, give them something to connect over. The drive home was quick, the streets of their suburban neighborhood quiet in the late evening. As Marcus pulled into the driveway of their modest two-story home, he noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street. A sleek, red sports car that seemed out of place among the family sedans and SUVs that usually lined their street. He frowned slightly but shrugged it off. Probably just a visitor to one of the neighbors. He climbed out of his car, his body aching from the hours of intense concentration and physical strain. All he wanted now was a warm shower, a cold beer, and maybe some quality time with Vanessa. It had been too long since they'd really talked. The moment he opened the front door, he heard hushed voices coming from the living room. Frowning, he made his way towards the sound. Something about the tone, the secretive quality of the whispers, set his nerves on edge. "Vanessa?" he called out, announcing his presence. There was a sudden scrambling sound. Then Vanessa's voice rang out, startled and high-pitched. "Marcus, you're home early." Marcus stepped into the living room, taking in the scene before him. Vanessa was perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture tense, her face flushed. Beside her sat Garrett Sloan, their neighbor and Vanessa's yoga instructor. Something about their body language, the guilty looks that flashed across their faces, set off alarm bells in Marcus's mind. "I just performed a life-saving surgery," Marcus said, his pride in his accomplishment battling with his growing suspicion. "I thought we could celebrate." Vanessa's response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "Garrett and I were just discussing yoga techniques." Marcus noticed the guilty look that passed between them, but chose not to comment. His instinct screamed that something was amiss, but he maintained his composure. Years of dealing with high-pressure situations in the operating room had taught him the value of staying calm in the face of unexpected challenges. "I see," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Well, don't let me interrupt. I'll be in my study if you need me." As he turned to leave, he caught Garrett's smug whisper, clearly not meant for his ears. "He doesn't suspect a thing." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he kept walking, his mind whirling with possibilities he didn't want to consider. What exactly didn't he suspect? And why did Garrett sound so pleased about it? In his study, Marcus sank into his leather chair, his earlier triumph forgotten in the face of this new, personal crisis. He stared unseeing at the medical journals stacked neatly on his desk, his mind replaying the scene he'd just witnessed. The guilty looks, the hushed voices, Vanessa's startled reaction to his arrival. None of it added up to anything good. He heard the front door close a few minutes later, followed by the sound of a car starting up outside. Garrett leaving, he presumed. Then Vanessa's light footsteps approached his study. "Marcus," she called softly, poking her head around the door. "I'm heading to bed. Are you coming up soon?" Marcus looked at her, searching her face for what? A sign of guilt? Remorse? He found nothing but a careful blankness that was almost worse. "I'll be up in a bit," he replied. "Just need to review some patient files." Vanessa nodded and retreated, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and suspicions. The next morning, Marcus awoke to find the bed beside him empty and cold. He frowned, glancing at the clock. It was barely 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Vanessa usually slept in on weekends. He found her in the kitchen, already dressed in yoga pants and a fitted top, keys in hand and heading for the door. "Where are you going so early?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual despite the knot of suspicion tightening in his gut. Vanessa startled, nearly dropping her keys. "Oh, Marcus. I didn't realize you were up," she said, her voice unnaturally high. "I have a doctor's appointment." Marcus's suspicions, which had simmered overnight, began to boil. At 7 a.m. on a Saturday, he pressed, unable to keep the skepticism out of his voice. It was the only time they had available, Vanessa replied evasively, not meeting his eyes. She fumbled with her purse, clearly eager to leave. "I've got to run. Don't want to be late." As the door closed behind her, Marcus made a split-second decision. He quickly threw on jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed his own keys, and followed her, maintaining a discreet distance in his car. The early morning streets were nearly empty, making it challenging to tail Vanessa without being spotted. Marcus's heart raced, part of him hoping he was wrong, that there was a perfectly innocent explanation for all of this. To his growing dismay, he watched as Vanessa pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript building. The sign out front read, "Fertility Clinic." His heart sank as he recognized Garrett's flashy red sports car already parked there. Moments later, Vanessa and Garrett walked into the clinic together, Garrett's hand resting on the small of Vanessa's back in a gesture that was far too intimate for Marcus's comfort. Marcus sat in his car, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The implications were staggering, but he forced himself to think rationally. There could be an explanation. There had to be. He drove to the hospital in a daze, throwing himself into his work to avoid the thoughts swirling in his mind. The day passed in a blur of patients, charts, and procedures. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but chalked it up to fatigue from the previous night's emergency surgery. "You all right, Steele?" Dr. Thompson, the chief of surgery, asked during a brief lull. "You seem a bit off today." Marcus forced a smile. "Just tired from last night's marathon surgery." "I'll be fine." As evening approached, Marcus steeled himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. As soon as he walked through the door of his home, he called out, "Vanessa, we need to talk." She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face was a mask of forced calm, but Marcus could see the tension in the set of her shoulders. "What about?" Marcus took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. "I saw you at the fertility clinic with Garrett this morning," he said, deciding to cut straight to the chase. "What's going on, Vanessa?" For a moment, shock flashed across Vanessa's face, quickly replaced by defiance. Her pretense of innocence dropped away like a discarded mask. "Fine," she snapped. "I wanted to keep this private, but since you're prying, Garrett and I want to have a baby together. I was hoping you'd be open to me being a surrogate for his child." Marcus was floored. The room seemed to spin around him, Vanessa's words echoing in his ears. "You can't be serious," he managed to choke out, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're my wife." "I'm an independent woman, Marcus," Vanessa snapped, her voice cold and hard. "I can do whatever I want with my body. If you can't accept that, maybe we shouldn't be together." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with finality. Marcus felt as if he'd been punched in the gut, all the air driven from his lungs. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, dreading the answer but needing to know. Vanessa's chin jutted out defiantly. "Does it matter? Garrett understands me in a way you never have. He supports my choices, my independence." Marcus laughed bitterly. "And I don't? I've always supported your career, your hobbies. I've never tried to hold you back." "It's not about holding me back," Vanessa retorted. "It's about truly seeing me, truly understanding what I need. And what you need is to have another man's baby." Marcus shot back, his calm facade cracking. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "It's not like that. Garrett can't have children of his own. I'm helping a friend." "A friend," Marcus repeated incredulously. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The conversation devolved from there, years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings bubbling to the surface. By the time it was over, Marcus felt drained, as if he'd just come off a 48-hour shift at the hospital. The following days were filled with a tense, suffocating silence. Marcus threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, saving lives and earning accolades at the hospital. It was easier to focus on the pain and suffering of others than to confront his own. "You're on fire lately, Steele," Dr. Thompson commented after Marcus successfully completed a particularly challenging surgery. "Whatever's driving you, keep it up." Marcus just nodded, not trusting himself to speak. If only his colleague knew the personal hell that was fueling his professional success. Meanwhile, at home, Vanessa grew more distant and defiant. She made no attempt to hide her frequent meetings with Garrett, coming and going as she pleased without explanation. One evening, Marcus returned home earlier than usual, his shift cut short due to a scheduling mix-up. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Garrett's flashy red sports car parked in front of their house. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, he walked in. The scene that greeted him in the living room made his blood boil. Garrett was lounging on the couch, their couch, the one Marcus and Vanessa had picked out together when they first moved in. His arm draped possessively over Vanessa's shoulders. They both looked up as Marcus entered, Garrett's face twisting into a smug sneer. "Face it, Doc," Garrett drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "You can't give Vanessa what she needs. Step aside like a good boy." Something in Marcus snapped. The accumulated stress, betrayal, and anger of the past weeks crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. His voice was dangerously quiet as he said, "Get out of my house. Now." Garrett's smirk faltered, but he didn't move. Marcus turned to Vanessa, his eyes blazing with a fury she had never seen before. "Pack your things," he said, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "You're leaving too. You can't kick me out." Vanessa protested, jumping to her feet. Her face was a mix of shock and indignation. "This is my home too." Marcus's voice was steel. "Not anymore. I've already contacted my lawyer. Expect divorce papers soon." The finality in his tone seemed to shock both Vanessa and Garrett into action. As they gathered Vanessa's things, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The life they had built together was crumbling, and there would be no going back. As Vanessa and Garrett were leaving, their arms full of hastily packed bags, Garrett couldn't resist one last jab. "You'll regret this, Steele," he called back, his earlier smugness replaced by barely concealed anger. "I have friends in high places." Marcus simply closed the door, shutting out their voices and the life he once knew. As the lock clicked into place, he leaned against the door, suddenly feeling every bit of his exhaustion. But beneath the fatigue, a steely determination was taking root. He walked through the house, now eerily quiet and empty. In the kitchen, he found a bottle of scotch in the back of a cupboard. He rarely drank, but tonight seemed like as good a time as any to start. As he poured himself a glass, his eyes fell on a framed photo on the counter. It was from his and Vanessa's wedding day, both of them beaming at the camera, full of hope for their future together. With a sudden, violent motion, he slammed the frame face down. Sinking into a chair at the kitchen table, Marcus took a long swig of his drink, relishing the burn as it went down. His mind was already formulating a plan. Garrett's parting threat echoed in his ears. Friends in high places, indeed. Well, two could play at that game. Weeks crawled by like wounded animals. Marcus Steele's life had become a monotonous blur of surgeries, rounds, and sleepless nights. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a mausoleum to his failed marriage. Every corner held a memory he'd rather forget. He threw himself into his work with a fervor that bordered on obsession. His colleagues noticed the change, the intensity that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. "Steele, you're on fire," Dr. Thompson commented one day after Marcus had performed a particularly challenging thoracic surgery. "I've never seen anything like it." Marcus just nodded, not trusting himself to speak. If they only knew the inferno raging inside him, fueling every incision, every suture. His reputation grew. Whispers in the hospital corridors spoke of his uncanny ability to save patients others had given up on. "Best surgeon in the state," they said. Marcus heard, but didn't care. It was all just noise, a distraction from the gnawing emptiness inside. But surgery wasn't enough. He needed more, needed to feel like he was making a difference beyond the sterile walls of the operating room. That's how he found himself at the local community center one rainy Tuesday evening. "You sure about this, Dr. Steele?" asked Maria, the center's coordinator. "These kids, they're not exactly easy to handle." Marcus looked at the group of teenagers slouching in their chairs, eyes full of suspicion and barely concealed hostility. He saw himself in them, the anger, the pain, the feeling of being lost in a world that didn't care. "I'm sure," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's start with basic first aid. You never know when you might need to save a life." As he demonstrated how to apply pressure to a wound, using a mannequin as a prop, he caught the eye of one of the boys. There was a flicker of interest there, a spark of something that looked almost like hope. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with anger or betrayal. This, he realized, was what healing truly meant. The sessions at the community center became a lifeline, anchoring him to something beyond his pain. He taught first aid, mentored the kids, listened to their stories. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he felt himself starting to heal. But the past wasn't done with him yet. One evening, as he left the hospital after a grueling shift, Marcus noticed a sleek black car idling in the parking lot. As he approached his own vehicle, the black car's engine purred to life. Marcus's hand instinctively went to his pocket, fingers closing around his keys. The black car pulled out, following Marcus as he exited the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, a familiar face came into focus. Garrett Sloan, grinning like a shark that had just scented blood. Instead of fear, Marcus felt a surge of something else. Anticipation. The game, it seemed, was indeed on. He drove calmly, heading not towards home but to a busy shopping center nearby. Garrett followed, maintaining a discreet distance. Marcus pulled into the parking lot, choosing a spot near the entrance of a large bookstore. As he browsed the medical section, pretending to be engrossed in a tome on cardiovascular surgery, he kept one eye on Garrett. The man was lurking near the self-help section, trying and failing to look inconspicuous. Marcus moved closer, ostensibly reaching for a book on the top shelf. As he did, he overheard two nurses from his hospital gossiping in the next aisle. "Did you hear about Dr. Sloan?" one whispered, her voice dripping with scandal. "Apparently, he's been writing fraudulent prescriptions." "No way," her companion gasped. "I always thought there was something off about him." "It's true. My cousin works in pharmacy. Says they've been getting a lot of suspicious scripts lately, all signed by Dr. Sloan." Marcus's ears perked up. He had found Garrett's weakness, the chink in his armor. As he watched Garrett slink out of the bookstore, Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile. The tables were about to turn. Marcus Steele was a man on a mission. The information he had overheard in the bookstore was just the beginning. He began his investigation with the meticulousness of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Late nights were spent hunched over his computer, following digital breadcrumbs. He called in favors from old colleagues, spoke in hushed tones with pharmacists, and pieced together a disturbing picture of Garrett Sloan's activities. Garrett, it turned out, was no mere yoga instructor. He styled himself as a holistic healer, offering a blend of Eastern mysticism and Western medicine that appealed to a certain type of wealthy, bored suburban housewife. The same type of woman Vanessa had become, Marcus thought bitterly. But Garrett's healing went beyond downward dogs and chakra alignments. He had been prescribing opioids to his yoga clients, feeding their addictions under the guise of pain management and spiritual awakening. Marcus's stomach turned as he uncovered the extent of Garrett's operation. The man was nothing more than a glorified drug dealer, profiting from the misery and desperation of others. As he compiled his evidence, copies of prescriptions, testimonies from pharmacists, even a recorded conversation with one of Garrett's clients, Marcus felt a grim satisfaction. He would bring this charlatan down, not just for personal revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, life had other plans. His phone buzzed one evening, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Marcus." The voice on the other end was small, hesitant. "Vanessa, what do you want?" He was surprised by the coldness in his own voice. "Can we talk? Please? I've made a terrible mistake." Part of him wanted to hang up, to cut this last tie to his past. But curiosity, and perhaps a lingering ember of what they once had, made him agree to meet. They chose a neutral ground, a small cafe downtown, far from their old haunts. As Marcus walked in, he spotted Vanessa immediately. She looked different, smaller somehow, diminished. The confident, vibrant woman he had married was gone, replaced by this pale shadow. "I've made a terrible mistake, Marcus," she said as soon as he sat down, not even waiting for pleasantries. "Can we work things out?" Marcus studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her coffee cup. For a moment, he felt a pang of the old affection, the urge to comfort and protect. But then he remembered. The betrayal, the lies. Garrett. His voice was kind but firm when he replied, "No, Vanessa. You made your choice. I hope you find happiness, but it won't be with me." He saw the hope die in her eyes, replaced by a resigned acceptance. As he stood to leave, he caught sight of a familiar figure across the street. Garrett, watching from the shadows, his face twisted with rage. Marcus walked out of the cafe, feeling lighter somehow. He had closed a chapter of his life, and now it was time to write a new one that would end with justice being served. The next day dawned bright and clear, a mockery of the storm brewing in Marcus's life. He strode into the hospital, mind already racing with plans for the day's surgeries. But as he approached the administrative wing, he noticed the hushed whispers, the sidelong glances from his colleagues. Something was wrong. Dr. Steele? The hospital administrator's secretary approached him, her face a mask of professional concern. Mr. Jameson would like to see you in his office immediately. Marcus's stomach dropped, but he kept his face neutral. Of course, he replied smoothly. I'll head there now. The walk to Jameson's office felt like a march to the gallows. Marcus's mind raced, trying to piece together what could have prompted this summons. He hadn't made any mistakes in surgery, had he? No, he was certain of that. His work had been impeccable, even more so since. The thought trailed off as he reached Jameson's door. He took a deep breath, straightened his white coat, and knocked. Come in, Dr. Steele. Marcus entered to find Jameson seated behind his imposing oak desk, his face grave. Please sit down. As Marcus lowered himself into the chair, Jameson cleared his throat. Dr. Steele, we've received an anonymous complaint about your conduct. We have to suspend you pending an investigation. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Suspension? Investigation? What the hell was going on? But even as the shock coursed through him, a part of his mind was already piecing it together. Anonymous complaint. Garrett's threat echoed in his memory. I have friends in high places. Marcus knew immediately who was behind this. But instead of getting angry, he smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile that made Jameson shift uncomfortably in his seat. I understand, Marcus said, his voice steady. I'll cooperate fully with the investigation. May I ask about the nature of the complaint? Jameson looked relieved at Marcus's calm demeanor. The complaint alleges inappropriate behavior with patients and possible substance abuse. I want to be clear, Dr. Steele, these are just allegations at this point. But we have to take them seriously. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing ahead. Garrett had overplayed his hand. These accusations were so far from the truth that they would be easy to disprove. And in doing so, he might just be able to turn the tables on his accuser. Of course, Marcus said, standing up. I assume you'll need my badge and access card for now? Jameson nodded, looking both relieved and slightly puzzled by Marcus's composure. Yes, thank you. And Dr. Steele? For what it's worth, I hope this all turns out to be a misunderstanding. Marcus handed over his credentials, feeling strangely liberated. So do I, Mr. Jameson. So do I. As he left the hospital, his head held high despite the curious and pitying glances from his colleagues, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm. This was Garrett's move, and it was a clumsy one. Now it was his turn. The parking lot was nearly empty as Marcus approached his car. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. As he reached for his car door, a voice called out from behind him. How does it feel to lose everything, Doc? Your wife, your job. You should have just played along. Marcus turned slowly to face Garrett, who was leaning against a nearby car, a smug grin plastered across his face. For a moment, Marcus was tempted to wipe that grin off with his fists. But he reined in the impulse. He had a better weapon than violence. You've made a grave mistake, Garrett, Marcus said, his voice calm and steady. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Garrett's grin faltered for a moment before he forced out a laugh. Big words from a man who just lost everything. Face it, Steele. You're finished. Marcus allowed himself a small, knowing smile. We'll see about that. As Garrett swaggered away, clearly believing he had won, Marcus felt a surge of determination. Garrett had no idea of the evidence Marcus had gathered, of the storm that was about to break over him. Marcus got into his car, his mind already formulating the next steps of his plan. Garrett thought he had won this round, but the game was far from over, and Marcus Steele was playing for keeps. The wheels of justice, Marcus Steele had learned, turned slowly. But they did turn. In the weeks following his suspension, he set his plan in motion with the precision of a master surgeon. His first move was to anonymously tip off the DEA about Garrett's prescription fraud. He used a burner phone, his voice disguised, to call in the tip. "You might want to look into Dr. Garrett Sloan," he said. "Word on the street is he's been writing scripts for Oxy like they're going out of style." The DEA agent on the other end of the line perked up. They'd been hearing whispers about a doctor running a pill mill in the suburbs, but names had been hard to come by. "You got any proof to back that up?" the agent asked. Marcus smiled to himself. "Check his prescription records, and maybe have a chat with some of his yoga students. You might find they're more interested in Downward Dog than you'd expect." As he hung up, Marcus felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt. Satisfaction, maybe. Or justice. He pushed the feeling aside. This was necessary. Next, he turned his attention to clearing his own name. He'd spent weeks compiling evidence, records of every surgery he'd performed, testimonials from patients and colleagues, even security footage showing him leaving the hospital at times when he was allegedly engaging in inappropriate behavior. He presented this mountain of evidence to the hospital board, along with a bombshell, proof that Garrett had fabricated the complaints against him. The board meeting was tense. Marcus stood before them, his posture straight, his gaze unwavering. "I've dedicated my life to this hospital and to my patients," he said. "I would never do anything to jeopardize that trust. The allegations against me are not just false, they're malicious." He laid out his case methodically, watching as the board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock to outrage. By the time he finished, there was no doubt left in the room. The chairman cleared his throat. "Dr. Steele, we owe you an apology. Not only will you be reinstated immediately, but we'd like to offer you a promotion. Chief of Surgery. Your dedication and integrity are exactly what this hospital needs." Marcus nodded, accepting their apology with grace. But inside, he was seething. How quickly they had been willing to believe the worst of him. How easily his years of service had been dismissed. As he left the meeting, he overheard two board members whispering, "Did you hear about Sloan? His medical license has been suspended pending a full investigation." "Dace involved." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The dominoes were falling, just as he'd planned. But his victory was short-lived. That evening, as he sat in his study, finally allowing himself to relax, his phone rang. The number was blocked, but he answered anyway. "Marcus." The voice on the other end was panicked, breathless. "Vanessa, what do you want?" he asked, his tone cold. "Marcus, please help." Vanessa's voice cracked with fear. "Garrett's lost it. He's threatening to expose some compromising photos of me if I leave him. I don't know what to do." Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, Marcus felt a twinge of concern. He had loved this woman once. He couldn't simply ignore her cry for help, but he wasn't a fool either. This could be useful. "Stay calm," he said, his mind already formulating a new plan. "I'll handle this." As he hung up, Marcus leaned back in his chair. He had dismantled Garrett's life, piece by piece. Now it was time for the final confrontation. The park was deserted at this hour, the setting sun casting long shadows across the grass. Marcus stood by the old oak tree, hands in his pockets, waiting. He didn't have to wait long. Garrett came storming across the lawn, his face twisted with rage. Gone was the smug yoga instructor, the smooth-talking charlatan. This was a man on the edge, desperate and dangerous. "You think you've won?" Garrett snarled as he reached Marcus. "I'll destroy you both." Marcus remained calm, his voice steady. "It's over, Garrett. I have evidence of all your crimes. The prescription fraud, the attempted framing, and now blackmail. You have two choices. Turn yourself in and seek help, or I release everything to the authorities and the media." Garrett's eyes widened, darting around like a cornered animal. For a moment, Marcus thought he might actually consider the offer. But then something snapped. With a roar of fury, Garrett lunged at Marcus, his hands clawing for the doctor's throat. But Marcus was ready. Years of martial arts training kicked in. Marcus sidestepped the attack, using Garrett's momentum against him. In one fluid motion, He had Garrett pinned to the ground, arm twisted behind his back. "You're pathetic, Garrett," Marcus said, his voice cold. "You've lost everything, and it's all your own doing." Garrett struggled, spitting curses, but Marcus held firm. In the distance, sirens wailed. The cavalry was coming. As the police car pulled up, lights flashing, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was over. Really over. He gave his statement to the officers, watching as they led Garrett away in handcuffs. The man was still shouting threats, promising revenge, but his words were empty now. He had no power left. One of the officers approached Marcus. "Dr. Steele? We'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement." Marcus nodded. "Of course. I'll be there first thing in the morning." As he walked away, leaving Garrett and all the chaos behind, Marcus felt lighter. The anger, the bitterness that had been driving him for so long began to ebb away, replaced by a sense of peace. He had faced his demons, had stared into the abyss of revenge, and walked away. He was ready to begin again. Months passed. The seasons changed, leaves falling and snow coming and going. And with each passing day, Marcus felt more like himself again. Or rather, a new version of himself. Stronger, wiser. He stood at the podium, looking out over a sea of eager young faces. Medical students, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to change the world. He remembered being like them once. "Ethics in medicine isn't just about following rules," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the lecture hall. "It's about making the right choices, especially when those choices are difficult." He saw a few students nodding, others scribbling notes furiously. Good. They were listening. You will face challenges in your careers. Ethical dilemmas that no textbook can prepare you for. When that happens, remember this. Your integrity is your most valuable asset. Guard it carefully. As he wrapped up the lecture, fielding questions from the students, Marcus felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. This was why he became a doctor. Not for the accolades or the money, but to make a difference. To help people. After the hall had emptied, Marcus checked his phone. There was a text waiting for him. From Vanessa. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. So much history there. So much pain. But also, closure. He typed out a simple reply. "I wish you well, Vanessa. Goodbye." As he sent the message, Marcus felt the last lingering traces of bitterness melt away. He had forgiven her, he realized. Not for her sake, but for his own. The drive home was peaceful. Marcus found himself reflecting on the tumultuous journey he'd been through. He had lost a wife, yes, but he had gained so much more. Clarity, purpose, a renewed sense of who he was and what he stood for. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw a familiar figure waiting for him. Dr. Sophia Chen, brilliant neurosurgeon and, for the past few months, his girlfriend. She smiled as he got out of the car, her eyes lighting up in a way that still made his heart skip a beat. "How was the lecture?" she asked, pulling him into a warm embrace. "Good," Marcus replied, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I think they actually listened for once." Sophia laughed, a sound that never failed to lift his spirits. "Of course they did. You're Marcus Steele, ethical crusader and surgical wizard. How could they not listen?" As they walked into the house together, discussing their days and planning for tomorrow, Marcus felt a profound sense of contentment wash over him. This, he realized, was what he had been searching for all along. Not revenge or validation, but understanding, support, love. The sun was setting over their suburban home, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was the end of one chapter, yes, but more importantly, it was the beginning of another, a better one. Marcus Steele had not just survived. He had triumphed. He had faced his trials and emerged stronger, wiser, more compassionate. And as he looked at Sophia, saw the love and respect shining in her eyes, he knew that the best was yet to come.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.